Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be getting uncomfortably close to the camera, apparently. I'm going to be reading from my book, Ruin, by me, Clarence Carter, published by Stephanie James Publishing. Get comfortable. Chapter 1. Baby Bobby's shrill cry broke me from an unrestful sleep. I sat up, scraping the crust from my eyes. Surprisingly, Beverly hadn't woke too. The aches and pains of my early 40s settled in. Each shriek pulsed in my ears, wanting to get to him before he woke her. I rushed across the floor and lifted him from the crib. All right, all right. Before leaving the room, I glanced over my shoulder to assure she hadn't woken too. Her eyes still closed, mouth partially open, and red, fiery hair sprang across her pillow in all directions like a frantic string mop after a 72-hour penthouse party. Descending the stairs, I cooed at the baby, rocking him. He protested, judging by the smell permeating from his diaper. He wanted more than just a bottle. Downstairs, I grabbed the bag and hit the power button on the remote. The TV came to life, broadcasting the 7 o'clock news. I hadn't thought of checking the clock. A blonde woman took over the screen as I laid the new diaper on the changing table. We're coming to you live just outside of Old Pine Valley, where local authorities have discovered a cave. Currently, we're awaiting the experts for further information. Here with us is the policeman who discovered it. Officer Dugan, what did you see inside? The cop groaned. There were drawings on the walls. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill graffiti. This looked like something older. I don't dare speculate on who or what may have put them there. The woman glanced at the camera. Like hieroglyphs? He agreed. Yeah, hieroglyphs. All I know is this wasn't punk teenagers. The blonde asked, how did you come across this cave? We've been combing these woods in search of the missing girl, Darla Reynolds. My partner and I were searching through this passage. I can confirm that she's not in there. We've been thorough with our search. The blonde nodded. Thank you so much for keeping Old Pine safe, and I hope you find Darla soon. Back to you, Michael. Pulling the strap closed on the new diaper, I poked Bobby's belly. He'd stopped crying momentarily. It had less to do with the commotion than contentment. What do you say we get breakfast going, huh, little guy? At that, he made no protest. He slid into the high chair with ease. As I turned my back to grab a bottle from the fridge, I caught a glimpse of the honey-do list. That's when I saw my wife's scrawled letters about interviewing nannies. There were 3 of them who had applied for the position. Oh, right. I almost forgot about that, I muttered, holding the bottle out. He latched on quickly. Just between the 2 of us, I don't know how I feel about having a stranger living here. I wish your mommy hadn't advertised it as a live-in position. A voice arose from the doorway. I don't know who else you expect it to work. How else you expect it to work, Robert? I'm not giving up my career. You're certainly not giving up yours. If we hired help, the poor girl would be coming and going at all hours. It makes more sense to have a full-time nanny than a traveling one. Unlike Beverly, I didn't grow up with a nanny. My parents, David and Cynthia, went without several things. That's why I was so desperate to get my soccer ball back from the Wilburns' house all those years ago. I had begged for a new ball for nearly a year before I finally got it on my 13th birthday. Dad worked long hours as a paralegal before becoming a lawyer, just to assure Mom could stay home with Raya and me. I didn't acknowledge it then, but later looked back at the sacrifices he made. I guess that's why I followed in his footsteps, going to school at night while working at the quarry before finally earning my law degree. Straightening my back, I said, I didn't see you there. She smiled. That's okay. You're going to have to trust me, all right? You'll be glad they're here. You'll thank me. I doubted that. I wouldn't ever say it aloud, but I now regretted that I had agreed to her starting at the network. I wanted more of a family life, like the one I was raised in, but Bev was determined to have the best of both worlds, her career and a family. I had even voiced the idea of having Rhea move back in to help with Bobby until he started kindergarten. Bev put that idea to rest, as well as as well, and said Ray didn't need distractions while at school. So that leaves me in the present, staring at a nanny for hire ad. I slid the thin blanket from the large birdcage, bringing George out of his hibernation. As I did, the sun came through the bay window, highlighting the red, yellow, and blue feathers of George, Bev's macaw parrot. She had the bird before we had met. I had to admit, I had never been fond of the loud avian, but I did enjoy seeing the gorgeous colors as I paced back and forth along the horizontal dowel. I washed my hands as it spread its wings to bask in the sun. The coffee pot gurgled to life as I placed a small pan on the stove and cracked some eggs. Did you see that thing on the news? She pulled the coffee mug from the cabinet. What thing? She sat down at the chessboard that we now used as a breakfast table. We had received it from Grandma Claire as a wedding gift, but as our careers took off, and now with Bobby, we rarely pulled the pieces out to play. They made a discovery of some ruins in a cave. She scoffed. Ruins? Like what? Ancient Egyptians? Cave people, probably. Still, that's an interesting discover for a sleepy nowhere town. She agreed. Oh, yeah. She swallowed with her finger in my direction. Don't forget the first interview will be here at 9. I scheduled them all about half an hour apart, so don't go telling them any of your courtroom war stories there, John Grisham. Ha! Ha! George mimicked loudly from his cage. I set Bev's plate before her on the chessboard table and kissed the top of her head. One of the things I loved most about her was that she didn't pull any punches. She didn't hide how she felt, which made our relationship easier and harder simultaneously. Sitting down, I added, hopefully there won't be too many more war stories. Once I get elected, I'll stop practicing law so quickly they'll put up missing posters in the office. Bobby giggled. I pointed to him in surprise. See that? I already have one vote. In between bites of egg, she said, if you get elected, with a smirk. Gilligan made her way out from our bedroom. She ducked her head beneath the tablecloth, making it easy for me to sneak her a corner piece of crust from my toast. Apparently, though, not sneaky enough. Robert, Bev said in her tone that meant we had been caught. No table scraps. It's not healthy for her. Yeah, I replied in an effort to avoid an argument. Gilligan's gnarled tail stub wagged excitedly as I rubbed her head and down to her back. I had found Gilligan before I had even met Beverly. Nearly 20 years ago, she had been banging out near. She had been hanging out near an open irrigation pipe. With a little encouragement, using my fast food hamburger as bribery, I was able to coerce her into becoming a member of my family, and now our family. There was no use explaining this to Bev, but if Gilligan had found an immunity to aging, I had little doubt a piece of 7 whole grain crust was a worry of hers. After breakfast, I started chores. I continued stealing glances at the TV, hoping for a follow up story. It had genuinely caught my attention, and I wanted to know what would come of it. Rather than covering that, they did a monologue about gas prices and foreign policies controlling the market. Before I knew it, the first of our applicants rang the doorbell. I grabbed my namesake and wandered to the front door. Gilligan raced me, as she always had to be the first to greet our guests. Unlike most dogs, she didn't bark much, which was nice, but she always stood in the way, making it a struggle to open the door. An older woman holding the newspaper adjusted her glasses to see the page more clearly. She looked surprised when I opened it. Is this 712 Vine Street? I gave her a half smile. Yes, it is. Are you here for the nanny position? She nodded. The other thing that made me uncomfortable was that Beverly hadn't given any information about our applicants, not even their names. Thankfully, years of defending people had given me a handful of social skills. Before stepping inside, she stopped. She grabbed onto the wall and hoisted one leg up with a grimace. Using my free hand, I helped her. Accident back in '98. Bad hip, she said, waddling inside. Sorry to hear that, I said, matching her pace. Gilligan also seemed to pick up on her slight disability and gave her room to walk. With the flick of a button, the TV went black. I knew if I didn't turn it off, I wouldn't be able to pay attention to the interview. I was unsure about the curious draw this discovery had on me, and why pushing the power button was almost painful. Turning it off made me uneasy about the updates, and I reminded myself that I could check it out online. Even before we began, I had my doubts. her age and mobility would be an issue. It wouldn't be long before Bobby turned into a toddler, and I wondered if she could chase him around, or heaven forbid, get to him before he got into the road. These concerns plagued me throughout the interview and eventually sealed her fate. I thanked her for coming and helped her down the step, but I didn't mention any follow up interviews, and she didn't ask. Perhaps she'd assumed I'd call. During our break, I took the small plastic bag from the standalone cupboard behind George's cage and filled his metal bowl with the familiar brown pellets. He caught a few times and ruffled his feathers before taking one into the tip of his black beak. I took his matching water bowl, rinsed it out, and replaced it with fresh water, then did the same to Gilligan's with a rubber non-slip base. "Here you go, girl," followed by two pats to her mid-back. The second woman wasn't much better. What she had in youth and vitality, she lacked in hygiene and manners. At one point during the interview, I wondered if I'd have to burn my couch because I didn't think Febreze would cover the stench. Gilligan even seemed to scrunch up her maw before letting out an abrupt sneeze, an uncontrolled way to dispel the smell from her nostrils. I ended it quickly, pretending to be busy and promising to call if I chose her. While waiting for the third interview, I turned on the TV. The expert stood in the frame, just before the mouth of the cave. Seismic activity along one of the fault lines could have exposed this cave. The reporter nodded, holding the mic before him. Also, one of the more interesting features that we've discovered about this cave isn't just the artwork. We've discovered human footprints captured in clay. They're slender, which leads us to believe that they may have been a woman or young adult. Weather may have played a crucial role in their preservation. The doorbell rang. Shutting off the TV, I got up from my seat and wandered to the door where my final contestant awaited. When I opened it, I didn't acknowledge the ease, not realizing it was from the lack of having to push Gilligan aside. I thought Bev had played a prank on me. The woman standing at the door looked nearly identical to her. If not for a thinner nose and slightly bigger ears, they might have been indistinguishable. I couldn't believe my eyes. Clearing my throat, I said, "I'm sorry to stare, it's just that you look so much like my wife." That was chapter 1. Hold on just a second. My office does not breathe very well. It's really hot in here. Chapter 2. Stepping aside, I let her in. She introduced herself as Felicia Wood as she approached the couch. It felt like something out of the Twilight Zone, and focusing on the interview proved difficult. The whole time, I wanted to call upstairs to let Beverly see her twin. Making her feel like a sideshow act stopped me. The bird cawed. "Your move, your move." I chuckled. Ignore him. George has gotten quite opinionated in his old age. It felt like a hallucination, like I was seeing my wife 10 years younger with some light plastic surgery. It made me wonder if they were related. Felicia lifted Bobby off the couch and held him. He cooed, reached out his hands, and grasped her red hair. "This is the little guy that we'll need help with. As you can see, he's a handful." Even as I spoke, I stole glances at the stairs, hoping she'd walk down and see for herself. But instead, I saw Gilligan peering out from the bedroom's cracked door. In the dark, I could mainly just see the reflection of her eyes. I instantly got distracted as Bobby grabbed Felicia's red hair, and I assisted in removing it from the baby's grip. I caught a whiff of her, not an unpleasant one. Unlike most women, she didn't smell of perfume or soap. Felicia smelled of the woods, of grass, and earth. I wondered if she'd been gardening before the interview, although her clothes weren't dirty. Bobby settled in her arms. It didn't take long before he drifted off to sleep. She looked like a natural with a baby in her hands, and I wondered if she had any children of her own. I doubted she did. We carried on with formalities, although I caught myself stumbling. There were questions I'd start and then lose. I couldn't believe my eyes. Still, "I'm sorry, I'm just a bit scatterbrained this morning." This made her smile. "No need to apologize. Babies can keep you up at all hours of the night." She wasn't wrong. It had been a few nights since he'd kept me up late, although he did have a habit of getting me up before my alarm clock in the mornings. The conversation had dulled. She wasn't the most talkative woman I'd ever met, which made the interview a bit more complicated. There were a few questions about her work history that she didn't really expand upon. Eventually, Beverly came downstairs. When she saw Felicia, she stopped in her tracks. Her mouth hung open. They didn't say anything at first, only stared. Even they saw it in one another. A chuckle escaped Felicia's lips. I guess you were right. We do look a bit alike. Still in shock, Beverly approached. It's like looking into a mirror. If the mirror had been hung in her college dorm, I thought, but didn't say. They were both beautiful women, but Beverly looked more mature. Crow's feet had started in the corners of her eyes, and frown lines creased her face. Gray poked through her blanket of straight hair. From there, Bev didn't seem to care about the interview or the position. She only cared about their uncanny resemblance. She asked Felicia several questions, specifically about her family. She dug deep, trying to find a connection, but couldn't. They weren't related, as far as either of them could tell. It happens sometimes, Felicia said. People look alike. Felicia was a bit more dismissive about the whole thing than Beverly. She said she'd come from a military family and moved around a lot, which made it even more unlikely that they were related. At first, Felicia seemed flattered. By the end of it, she didn't seem to care. She tried getting the conversation back on track. During the Inquisition, Bobby awoke. She took the binky from the table and settled him in yet again, but not before asking about his feeding schedule. He eats about every 3 hours, except he gets fussy when it comes to the end of the night. Sometimes he won't take the bottle at all past 6 o'clock. With the baby still in the crook of her arm, she nodded. And naps? The comfort with which they spoke to each other was interesting to me. It didn't surprise me at all that they were speaking as if she'd already got the job. Believe me, he'll let you know when it's time. At this, they both chuckled. She seemed like a nice girl, even though something about her timing seemed off. When asked a question, she took a few extra seconds to respond, as if she were digging through 10 answers for the right one. I wondered if she might be careful about her responses, or perhaps she was on the spectrum. I didn't know if it was a trait that I'd picked up as a lawyer. I wasn't even sure that other people would notice because of how brief it was. Once asleep, she placed him on the couch. There, she whispered. Her eyes were the same greenish blue as Beverly's, and they looked just as quizzical. I'm very interested in this position, she said, brushing her hair off her shoulder. By far, she'd been the best candidate. I still intended on doing a background check and calling her references. There were still T's to cross and I's to dot. You're hired, Bev said. Just like that, we had our nanny. I had to stop myself from looking at her and making a face. On our way to the door, I said, You can start whenever it's convenient. The pay was in the posting, so you already know about that. Thank you so much, she said, extending her hand. You have a lovely family. Thank you, I said, closing the door behind her. Beverly looked timid. When I was certain Felicia wasn't within listening distance, I spoke. We really should have done the background check on her. She rocked Bobby in her arms. Sorry, I just got excited. She's the one. I can feel it. Bev wasn't as concerned about such affairs as I was, considering all that had gone on in my life. I'd even considered myself a touch paranoid. She was much better than the other candidates, but I didn't plan on hiring her on the spot. I wanted to make sure that she had a decent work history. Ask her former employers why she didn't work there anymore, just to make sure she wasn't a thief or anything. Bev gave me an assuring smile. You're always so worried. Relax. Trust me. Years of working around criminals had given me a poor outlook on life. I'd seen some horrible things, crime scene photos that would make some people vomit. I'd also been through my own share of hardships, being kidnapped by Jack Wilburn, having Brad turned into a garden gnome, and eventually killing Wilburn in a fire when his house burned down. Only a few days separated us from Felicia moving in. One night, unable to sleep, I sat in my study, flicking through legal documents and sipping brandy. I decided to search for her on social media. I would have given It would have given me a glimpse into her life. I ran her name through the search bar. A handful of Felicia Woods came back, but none looked like her. One without a profile picture remained. It had been inactive for years, and the few posts were all religious texts and follow chains. Looking over my shoulder, I caught a glimpse of my mom's chessboard sitting behind me on the fireplace hearth, like the one in the dining room. It had been too long since I'd played, and I considered setting up the pieces just because. I missed the 2 years Bev and I had been dating. She had come to every one of my weekly chess classes at the library. That was years ago, before we went to school, before I became a paralegal, then a partner at the law firm. And now, with me throwing my hat into politics, I doubt I'd ever have time again. I leaned over the corner of the couch arm and moved a white pawn. It was probably for the best. After Bev and I married, I would often get repetitive nightmares of the suffering that had happened before, and I reconsidered arranging the pieces in the correct positions. As I pulled my hand back from the piece, I saw the spine of one of the books on the bookcase. It was a thin black book that had a green reflection shimmer down its length. It was the book Rhea had left behind when she had been staying in our spare room after Mom had died. Bev brought it out and put it in our bookshelf after she left for the dorm until she would return. Gilligan stood up, eyeing the book, looking down her nose like the iron sight of a rifle. A low growl rumble from her chest, and the stub of her gnarled tail erect at an upward angle. Just the light, I thought. A phone call to Bev's mother didn't shed light on their similarities. Tilly didn't know any of the family members named Felicia and didn't have any other kids besides Beverly. None that she'd put up for adoption or anything of the sort. Quite the opposite. She'd had a hard time conceiving Beverly and wasn't able to have another. Broadening my search, I checked Google. I flicked through pages, hoping to find a yearbook photo of an article about sports accomplishments. I even specified the area, hoping it would narrow the results. But 2 hours of searching accomplished nothing. My first thought was that she belonged to a religious family that didn't approve of social media. I even considered that the page I'd found might have been hers when she'd been younger. Then, as an adult, she just never returned. She lived outside the scope of the internet, which didn't seem possible anymore. Polishing off my brandy, I retreated to the bedroom, followed by Gilligan. Felicia's absence online surprised me. It seemed like people, especially younger ones like herself, lived online. The private investigators we hired through the firm could find anything online. They rarely had to knock on doors like in the old days. Not long after lying down, a horrendous nightmare took me. The piercing shriek of a native tribe broke the silence. Coming to, I looked around, seeing large fields and movement in the distance. The stomping of horse hooves grew louder as they drew closer. Arrows struck the ground around me. My heart thundered. I tried to run, but fell instead. Before I knew it, they surrounded me. I awoke with a jolt, gasping for air. Sweat trickled from my forehead. Searching my mind, I tried to determine where the dream might have come from. I wondered if I'd seen or heard something on TV. Nothing rang any bells. For a long time I stared at the ceiling, trying to soothe myself. Part of me even hoped the baby would wake up so I had something to do, something to distract myself. Eventually, sleep returned. The following day I sat behind my desk surrounded by paperwork, even up to my knees in litigation, and looking down the barrel of a huge trial. I couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious woman moving into my house. Something still didn't feel right. For some peace of mind, I called Nancy, one of the PIs our firm used, a brilliant woman with a knack for finding things that were never meant to be found. The phone rang a few times. Robert, how can I help you? Nance, I was hoping you could look into something for me. Sure. What am I looking for? I paused. That's just it. I'm not sure. Anything you can find. She paused. This wasn't this this wasn't how we did things. This must have raised a flag. Oh, so unofficially? I agreed. Don't make too much noise when you're looking. She's my nanny, just trying to be safe for Junior, you know? I understand. How's the family doing anyway? Bobby must be growing like a weed. You have no idea. Everybody's good, hoping to keep it that way. I gave her what little information I had. If anybody could dig up dirt on her, it would be Nancy. I'll see what I can do. Get back to you when I find something. Thanks, Nance. A little wave of relief washed over me. There were a lot of things I could forgive. If Nancy uncovered a DUI or something, if it wasn't a pattern, I could forgive that. People make mistakes. I just wanted to be safe. Flipping through the files, I found it difficult to focus. Between the nightmare and Felicia moving in so quickly, my mind was off to the races. As I continued reading the case file, I figured out where the nightmare had come from. A massive real estate company had acquired land believed to be a native burial ground. They wanted to turn it into an apartment complex. They'd come to our firm to cut through all the red tape. There were a few people at the firm with a focus on real estate law, which wasn't my area of expertise. I helped with some of the filings and the other basics, but not much. On my drive home, I considered the dream further and tried connecting it to the cave story. Clearly, there'd been a few things on my mind that led to that dream. Living so close to Navajo Nation played a factor in it too, certainly. The house smelled of cookies by the time I got home. Beverly busied herself in the kitchen, even though she was a decent cook. She didn't do much baking. We usually went to the bakery down the street. Pulling off my blazer and placing it on the back of the chair, I asked, "What's going on in here?" She pulled the oven mitt off and placed it on the counter. "I'm just trying to make a good impression, is all." I kissed the top of Bobby's head as he drooled in his high chair. His bottle lay on its side in front of him. Grabbing my wife by the waist, I pulled her into me. "You look adorable in that apron." "Is that so?" she asked, flushing. We kissed. Our intimate life had been obstructed by our newborn. Whenever we intended to do the deed, we were either too exhausted or the baby cried, ruining the moment. It had been a while since we'd been together. My hand slid down her backside. Before anything could happen, the doorbell rang, setting the bird off in a fit. "Doorbell," George screeched. I rolled my eyes, not at all surprised. When it came to romance, we had the worst luck. She pulled away slightly. "Could you get that, honey? Maybe we'll pick this up later?" I wandered to the door, unimpressed. On the other side, Felicia stood smiling. We'd expected her, but I didn't think she'd return until later. She had one canvas bag of clothes. I looked over her shoulder, expecting a moving truck, a car, or something. Nothing. I found this strange, too, but I considered that she might be moving her things slowly over the course of the next couple of weeks. Without a word, I allowed her inside and pointed her upstairs to the spare bedroom. Things were moving a bit fast for my liking, but Beverly seemed smitten. As she went up the stairs, I couldn't help looking at her bag. It looked brand new, as if she'd just pulled it off the rack that morning. Returning to the kitchen, I considered telling Bev about the bag, but I already knew what she'd say. There were a lot of people who didn't drive, people who couldn't afford cars either. These possibilities stifled my conspiracy for the time being. The possibility of a DUI or a suspended license still lingered in my mind, and I knew if there was anything like that, Nancy Edgecombe would find it. That earthly smell followed her. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it reminded me of camping as a kid. Dew, moss, the outdoors. I wondered if she was an avid hiker or something. I intended on asking her questions about the hobbies during the interview, but Beverly had thrown off my plan. Beverly asked me to watch the cookies and the baby as she brushed past me, eager to help Felicia settle. They thumped up the stairs, gossiping. Although I couldn't make out their words, their giggles traveled. Not long after that, the timer went off, and I fetched the cookies from the oven. Bobby didn't seem interested in me or the cookies. He pushed a strawberry around in a puddle of drool. The to-do list still stared back at me from the fridge, incomplete. It reminded me that I needed to water the ficus, which wasn't on the list. She expected me to remember it, which I often didn't. The fact that it hadn't lost all its leaves and shriveled up surprised me. I liked that it was a bit more resilient than other plants that had dried up from my neglect. Briefly, I considered calling Nancy to see if she'd found anything, but I resisted. Instead, I grabbed my phone off the counter and searched for the mysterious ruins. I wondered if they'd found anything else of interest. I even considered driving there to have a look for myself, but figured it would be blocked off to the public. I'd always been a fan of Egyptology and watched documentaries when I could. Flicking through the articles, I found an expert who'd written a piece about the cave's geographical location. He expressed the possibility that a tectonic shift split the rocks apart and displayed the cave that could have been dormant for thousands of years. I scratched my head, wondering how long it had been accessible. I also questioned the lack of earthquakes. If there'd been one, the news either didn't cover it or it had been buried under the other stories. My fingers hovered, ready to search the seismic activity in the area. Their footsteps came first, then their voices. Beverly said, "This is where we'll be taking most of our meals." Seeing them standing side by side unsettled me. They looked so much alike that I thought it wasn't just strange, but impossible. I wasn't an expert, but the odds had to be crazy. They always said that everyone had a doppelganger somewhere, but I'd never heard of them living under the same roof. "It's a very nice kitchen," Felicia said. "And look who we have here," she added, approaching Bobby. I tried to help. "Make yourself comfortable. Take your time adjusting. Moving can be quite taxing." A polite smile crossed her face. "That won't be necessary. I'm ready to start right now." A text message pinged on my phone. "Nancy." She texted to say she hadn't found anything yet, but planned to keep digging. That wasn't what I'd wanted to hear. My fingers ran over the buttons, feeling the wear from a couple of years of frenzied phone calls and text messages. I tapped out my response with a silent groan of disappointment. Felicia stepped past me, grabbed some paper towels from the bar, and approached the high chair. She began cleaning up the strawberry mush Bobby had created. Bev had a flirty look in her eye as she said, "Now that we've got some help around the house, we can pick up date nights again." My mind barely registered the context of this until the moment had passed. My thoughts had been elsewhere. By the time I figured it out, the disappointed look had already crossed her face, and she looked away. When they were settled in, I left them to it. The stairs creaked as I approached my office. The familiar walls surrounded me, bringing forth a sense of comfort. "Oh, hey, girl." Gilligan was lying between my desk and a storage chest. I sat down before my computer screen, entered my password, and the background of our beautiful family came into view. The internet browser opened, followed by Google. There were tons of articles about native graves, but the locations had been lost to time. None of the locals were certain that they were on my client's property. Even if they were, I didn't know there was much they could do to stop it. Our case looked airtight. After pawing around with work for a little while, I searched for Felicia online again, looking through pages and pages of Google results. There were other people in the country with the same name. One of them had been a ballerina. It didn't take long to discover it wasn't the same one. She was only 14 and lived in Dallas. Unsatisfied with my search results, I went back downstairs. The two women were holding Bobby so he could see George on the perch above the cage. I cleared my throat, gaining their attention. "I'm gonna go to the store right quick. Need anything?" Beverly shook her head. Climbing down the front steps, I looked off into the distance where the sun had gone down. A bite lingered in the air. The ruin had called me all day. I routinely checked the web, but they hadn't published anything new. All I could find were speculation pieces and YouTubers touring it. I wondered how I could get there and back without raising too much suspicion. As I thought about my alibi, the car came to life. Even if Beverly did find out, I didn't think she'd do much. She might complain, question my motives, but that's all. Without a plan, I approached the highway. I slid onto the road, considering what I was doing before pressing my accelerator. There were too many questions, too many things unanswered. It called me unlike anything in the media had before. My phone rang, startling me. Looking down at it, I expected Bev. I thought she might have been tracking me, somehow, and laughed at my own paranoia. Nancy's name filled the screen. "Hello?" I asked, rolling up the window so I could hear her over the wind. "Robert, what are you up to?" I considered telling her the truth, that I was headed out to a cave for no reason other than curiosity. "Just hanging around, waiting for an update. That's why I called. I followed all my leads. You've got yourself a genuine ghost. I don't know who she is or where she came from. Thus far, I haven't even figured out where she went to school. I haven't found a birth certificate. Nothing. As much as it unsettled me, I wasn't surprised. Something about her wasn't right. The car came to a stop, and I searched the shadows through the headlight beams. Thanks. That brings me great comfort knowing this ghost lives in my house." On the phone, Nancy sounded much older. "Press her. Get information. Make this search easier for both of us." "All right," I said. "See what I can do." Darkness had taken over by the time I reached the woods. From there, I used my flashlight to illuminate my path. As I went, I checked over my shoulder, cautious that someone might be lurking in the dark. A transient, a cop, someone with ill intentions. I tried imagining how the cave went unnoticed. The thought of it becoming visible because of a tectonic shift seemed unlikely. The plates moved very slowly. I wondered if someone had helped the process along, but I couldn't imagine how or why. After nearly 10 minutes of walking, I found the rocks I'd seen on the news. They weren't a part of a mountain, but a large formation. I stood in front of them, looking to see if I had company. I didn't. The yellow tape that had once surrounded it had been discarded on a tree branch. Something scurried in the woods, startling me. I moved closer, examining the exterior with my light. I hoped to see something that would indicate power tools or machinery, something that would imply that people had forced its discovery. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. It looked like rocks. The cameraman must have played with the angles because it looked much smaller than I'd expected. Stepping into the cave, the hieroglyphs stole my breath. I couldn't believe my eyes. The thought of something so ancient seemed bizarre and out of place. I reminded myself that the country was new, but the land had been around for a long time. I think I'm going to stop there for now. Well, that was most of chapter 1 and 2. It's so hot in here. It's so ungodly hot in here. Thanks for showing up, everybody. I think I'm going to be done for tonight. Bye-bye. Welcome back, everybody. Pick up where I left off yesterday. With a single finger, I traced the outlines, wondering how they'd done it. I tried imagining them carving those grooves with stone. They weren't hieroglyphs like Egyptology. They were closer to cave drawings, with a few repetitive symbols. The pictures told a story, one I didn't understand. The shutter of my camera snapped. Without the sun, the lighting sucked. Even with the flash on, they weren't great quality. After 10 minutes, I'd seen everything. There were poor depictions of people and animals and something that looked like the sun. My mind reeled at all the possibilities. I wondered if it were cavemen or some native tribe. I also tried to wrap my head around what it was they were trying to communicate. To me, it didn't look like they were etched for pleasure. A presence lingered in that cave, something I couldn't put my finger on. While inside, I didn't feel alone, which seemed silly because I could see every wall. I'd never been one to believe in ghosts, but the presence felt like something I'd never experienced before. It felt wrong to turn my back on it, as if it would chase me. The same feeling I got climbing the basement stairs as a kid, as if something were watching, waiting for the right chance to get me. Outside, I paused, taking in the scene. Above was a network of stars that weren't visible in the city. They were beautiful, but the unsettling feeling permeated from the cave. Didn't allow me to stay very long. On my way back through the woods, I couldn't help thinking about the dream I'd had, the calling, the arrows. My headlights cut through the shadows, illuminating the desolate road ahead. On my drive back, I had more questions than answers. The pictures I'd taken with my phone hadn't done it any justice. Daylight would have been much better than the flash. A song played on the radio, one I'd heard 1,000 times but couldn't remember the title or the artist. I tapped my foot, trying to keep rhythm, something I'd never been good at. Trees reached out from the edges of the road, branches like fingers creaking on rusty bones. Even miles away, it felt like those stalking eyes were on me. The lights of a little store caught my eye. I pulled off the road and cut the engine. A young woman stood at the pump, with her head on a swivel. She saw me coming, and I couldn't blame her for being cautious. We made eye contact as I walked toward the store. Upon closer inspection, I saw her high cheekbones and dark complexion. A native girl. Young. Stepping inside the store, I headed for the coolers, where I found a gallon of milk. From there, I got a loaf of bread and some butter. Considering Beverly had been baking, they were easy choices. I also got a little something for myself, a bottle of bourbon. Light music danced through the aisles. Coolers buzzed. A magazine rack stared back at me, covered with the faces of movie stars, headlines depicting scandal after scandal. The cashier hardly batted an eyelash as he scanned my items through and gave me a total. As she popped her gum as I pawed through my wallet in search of cash, which I didn't have enough of, I used my credit card instead. The bell jingled above the door as I stepped back into the cool night air. I didn't recall it jingling when I went in, but sometimes you get used to such things. The girl who'd been at the pump was gone. By the time I pulled into the driveway, all the lights were off, and everyone had settled in for the night. Walking inside, I realized I bought all those things for nothing. It didn't matter. I still put everything away and marched up the stairs to sleep myself. Quiet, I got undressed, trying not to wake my wife. That earthy smell seemed stronger, as if it had come into our bedroom on my clothes. Easing into my bed, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Sleep eluded me. It wasn't until I nearly drifted off to sleep when my eyes shot open in recognition. The smell from the cave matched Felicia. Chapter 3. The following morning I woke up before everyone else, or so I thought. Downstairs, I found Felicia slaving away in the kitchen. "Good morning," she said, with high spirits. "How'd you sleep?" I couldn't tell if she was being genuine or if the insomnia was plastered on my face. "Fine," I muttered. I turned to get the coffee going, only to find that she'd already started the pot. Coffee trickled in the cup. While she wasn't looking, I stared at her for a second, trying to imagine what kind of secrets she might be hiding. In my experience, people who didn't have a presence online did it on purpose. Remembering the conversation I'd had with Nancy, I asked, "Where is it you said you came from again?" The wonderful smell of bacon and eggs rose from the stove, covering the earthy scent. "Well, I came from a military family, so everywhere and nowhere?" If true, that answer would have explained a couple of things. It didn't explain why I hadn't found anything in the paper about her or yearbooks. If I were hiding my identity, I might say something similar. "Ever married?" She shook her head. "What about you?" she asked. "Where are you from?" Clearly she wanted to take some of the heat off herself. Waving my hands around, I said, "Here, born and raised." Steam rolled off my cup. I asked a few more questions, but she didn't give me anything useful. I asked about college, which would have narrowed the search down some, but she hadn't gone. With as little information as we'd found on her, she could have been Amish. Sitting at the table, scrolling through my phone, I tried finding some information on the cave. Nothing came up. The media seemed to have forgotten about it rather quickly. Tapping my fingernail on the table, I searched around. That's when I noticed our 3-tier basket that we kept our fruit in. All the apples had grown mold. I tried to imagine how that was possible. We hadn't had them that long. I pretended not to notice. From the basket, I looked at Felicia, who worked diligently behind the stove. "Did you hear anything about the ruins?" Her head whipped around. "What?" The reaction she'd given me had been the most interesting response of them all. I couldn't squeeze blood from a stone about anything else, but at the mention of the ruins, she flinched. Trying to cover, she said, "Sorry, I'd gone into my own little world." She didn't answer, only began serving plates of scrambled eggs and bacon. By then, my appetite had mostly faded. I scratched some of it with my fork and ate very little. 2 flies circled the rotting fruit, buzzing. The resemblance still bothered me, but being around her made their similarities less obvious. Even identical twins can be told apart, if you know them well enough. With Bobby still in bed and Beverly upstairs, we were alone. She poured herself some coffee and leaned against the counter. I could feel her eyes on me. At first, they didn't make me uncomfortable. Even when I looked up from my plate, she hadn't stopped. If anything, it seemed as if her stare had intensified. It wasn't an ordinary stare. It felt motivated, fueled by something like hunger or maybe desire. I tried pushing the thought from my mind the second it entered. Her dark hair danced as she moved. Unpainted lips kissed the edge of her cup. Slender fingers clutched the handle. Using the mug, she hid a smile. Placing it on the counter, she said, "I'll get the baby up." While she wasn't around, I dumped the food in the trash. Over my shoulder, I glanced at the fruit one last time. The mystery plagued me. Before she came back, I grabbed my briefcase and blazer and slid out. On my drive, a song crossed the radio, one I couldn't quite remember. I'd never been good at music. My ability to focus wavered. Repeatedly, I thought about the rotting fruit. As I pulled into the parking lot, I turned off the engine, and the song died. For a little while, I sat there trying to piece together all my fragments of thoughts. I checked my phone, hoping to have an update from Nancy. Nothing. Sitting behind my desk, unable to work, I couldn't help thinking about that look she'd given me. She'd been staring at me with intent, but I couldn't imagine what. I wasn't vain enough to believe that it was lust, although the thought had crossed my mind. Sitting back in my chair, the thought of those long-ago chess games crossed my mind. I thought about calling Raya. After looking at the clock, I changed my mind. I imagined she'd be in class, and I didn't want to interfere with her academics, not at what they cost per year. For a long time, I stared at my screen, trying to work. I had a couple of meetings, but couldn't keep my focus on anything they were saying. My thoughts trailed in every direction except my case, which I believed I had in the bag anyway. Felicia and the caves were connected. I couldn't explain how, or even how I knew, aside from the smell. By the time lunch rolled around, I hadn't gotten much done. Of the 3 meetings I planned, I missed one with the firm's partners. They didn't hunt me down either. If they noticed my absence at all, I didn't think they'd punish me for it. After lunch, I couldn't bring myself to stay any longer. The hours were there, but the effort wasn't. I wasn't doing myself any favors by staying, so I grabbed my things and left. The same song played on the radio on the way home. I didn't know whether it was because the station played the same 3 songs repeatedly, or because it held a profound meaning I didn't grasp the first time. I doubted that. Unlike the night prior, I drove toward the caves, but didn't commit. Halfway there, I turned around and drove back. Most of the lights were off by the time I pulled into the driveway. I knew I'd been out late, but didn't know how late. When I looked at the clock, it told a different story. It wasn't even 8. Stepping inside, I saw Felicia and the baby, but not Beverly. "Where's Bev?" I asked. Felicia paused, looking up while feeding the baby. "She wasn't feeling well, poor thing. Went to bed early." There were a few viruses roaming around, and it didn't surprise me that much. A couple of guys at the firm had gotten sick. I reached over and took Bobby from her. All her mysteries swirled in my head. I wondered if I was paranoid. Bobby giggled. We played peekaboo on the floor for a little while as the news played. Felicia got up and disappeared. The news anchor said, "Tonight we have a piece on the lottery scam. People who work for the state lottery have been caught tampering with the games. More on that later." Felicia passed by with a basket full of laundry. I considered interrogating her further, but decided against it. I didn't want her to be onto me so early. In my head, tons of unanswered questions festered. A lacy little number fell out of the basket, and she stopped to fetch it from the floor. It didn't belong to Beverly. Uncomfortably, I tried to distance myself from the awkward situation. "Why do you suppose that ruin story fell out of the news so fast?" She looked at me with a strange, concerned look. It disappeared in a flash. What ruin story? I didn't know what I'd seen there, but it wasn't surprise. She'd known something. You know, the ruins they discovered. It was a big story earlier this week. She smiled. "Oh, right. Well, it's an election year. They're going on about the next president. That takes up a lot of airtime and column inches." She let out an uncomfortable laugh and carried on toward the washer. I looked at the TV, saw that they were talking about polling, and rolled my eyes. After that, they talked about celebrity endorsements, which I scoffed at. I'd never liked that concept. It all seemed so phony. Why should anyone care what celebrities have to say about politics? Half of them don't know what they're talking about. The TV went dark with a click. Bobby's eyes had grown heavy. I carried him up the stairs and into the bedroom where Beverly lay completely still. A light snoring hummed. Carefully, I placed him down in the crib. I rubbed his belly, a trick I'd picked up. If he were on the verge of falling asleep, a light rub could get him the rest of the way. Once free of the baby, I wandered out from my room, closing the door with a light click. Down the hall, I slid into my office. I couldn't help staring at the chessboard. thinking my situation wasn't that different from a game of chess. I made moves, she made moves. Part of me wondered if she dropped her lingerie on purpose. As soon as I had that thought, I pushed it out of my head. Those ideas were dangerous. The search for more on Felicia didn't yield any results. I held my head in my hands, disappointed. I couldn't understand how we couldn't find anything. People always leave digital footprints. She wasn't a part of the generation that repelled technology. She likely would have grown up with it, as we had. Scents wafted from the kitchen and danced in my nostrils. I couldn't put my finger on exactly they were, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what they were, but it smelled good. Descending the stairs, I followed that scent into the kitchen. Felicia stood in the front of the stove, stirring something. Trying to be helpful, I gathered a few plates from the cupboard and some silverware. I set the table. While I did, something caught my eye. The ficus that Catherine constantly gave me crap about had wilted. Its leaves were turned down and brown. Someone had tossed out the rotting fruit. In the other room, George cawed, "Your move, your move." It still gave me shivers. "Thanks for setting the table," she said. The stove went off with a click. She began serving dinner. We sat across from one another, not saying much. She had a pleasant, almost knowing smile, although I didn't want to admit it. At times I considered her innocence. Apart from being strange and not having much of a background, she hadn't done anything wrong. The other part that bothered me was how attractive I found her, mostly because she looked like Beverly. I tried not to let that go into my head. Tried to draw barriers there. I couldn't find my wife attractive and not a woman who could pass as her sister. It made me wonder if spouses of twins go through something similar. An image of her in those lacy panties flashed through my mind, and I immediately felt guilt. I got up and rummaged through the cabinets in search of alcohol. I sipped at a glass of red I'd poured for myself, wondering what it was about the ruins that called to me. After deep consideration, I concluded that it was mostly the proximity that interested me. Perhaps it had only been the timing of our new nanny that made her seem connected to them. I met her on the same day. As for the smell, a lot of things smell earthy. She cleared her throat, drawing my attention. "Are you working on any big cases right now?" For a moment, I thought that someone might have hired her to spy on me, but I couldn't imagine who would do such a thing. "There's this case concerning an apartment complex. Rather boring stuff, really." She chewed on her piece of steak. "I don't know that much about litigation. They make it seem interesting on TV. I got that a lot. It's not as nearly as exciting as TV. Most of it's rather boring, paperwork and such. The trials that they play are a very small percent of what I do." For a little while we stared at one another. I took notice of her dark hair and thin face. Despite the difference in her hair color, they were identical. Even her eyes looked like Bev's. I took a deep drink from my glass and considered how we had ended up in our present situation. Once finished with dinner, she gathered up the plates. As she did, she asked if there was anything she could do for me. That also struck me as odd, considering I'd never had someone waiting on me before. "No, that's okay." "Are you sure?" Her eyes sparkled. "I'd do anything for you," emphasizing the anything. The bird cawed. "Wrong move." I looked over my shoulder at George. Peculiar, I thought. Chapter 4. The following morning, things were better. Beverly got out of bed and beat me downstairs. She had some color in her face, but didn't move with the same youthful energy as before. Outside, rain tore from the sky. After getting dressed, I made my way down to the kitchen. Finishing her last gulp of coffee, Beth said, "Felicia and the baby went out for a walk before it started raining. I guess they're soaked now. Make sure he gets dried off and warmed, okay? I can't stick around until I get back. I have a meeting." She gave me a kiss before walking outside. From the window, I watched as she pulled up her hood and ran out into the rain. She took refuge in her car, and before long, she took off. Gilligan came rushing down the hall to the back door. I opened it, and she eagerly ran outside. Somewhere in the distance, a crack of thunder filled the silence. During the 10 times I'd checked my phone, I hadn't once thought to look at the weather. With the ruins gone from the public eye, I tried to find a replacement story. Nothing quite filled that void, though. Bev had cooked a small meal, leaving a few strips of cold bacon and some instant oatmeal behind. I tossed them into the microwave and watched it spin. Another crack of thunder made Gilligan paw at the back door. She walked in after I opened it. She stopped and shook. "Gilligan, couldn't you have done that outside?" Rain plunked on the roof. I sat at the table and stared out the window. After a few minutes, Felicia pushed the stroller up the driveway. Gilligan heard the knob on the front door and ran down the hall, where she again disappeared into my office. Coming in, shaking off the cold, Felicia muttered, "I should have checked the weather this morning." This made me chuckle because I hadn't either. I got up from the table and stepped closer to them. She handed me the baby. He wasn't as wet as I'd expected, probably because he'd been under the stroller's hood. Felicia, on the other hand, was soaked. "Oh no," she said. "All my clothes are in the washer." Not thinking much of it, I said, "Oh, just help yourself to whatever Bev has until yours are dry." I turned to the linen closet and fetched a towel for Bobby. He fussed a bit, looked as if he were about to cry, but yawned instead. He didn't struggle much when I changed the diaper either. When Felicia returned, my knees nearly buckled. Of all the things she could have chosen, she'd gotten into one of Beverly's lacy slips. My eyes nearly fell out from my head as I tried not to stare. My thoughts scattered, and I tried to regain my focus. To see my wife again, in her prime, I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear my thoughts. I hope she won't mind. I just grabbed something easy. The word easy had a strange inflection on it. I tried not to think about that either. She could have gotten sweatpants or leggings. She could have worn her jeans because they were nearly the same size. Rubbing my temples, I could only think about getting out of there. If Bev were to find me in a room with her dressed like that, I'd be in trouble. I considered talking to her about it being inappropriate, but thought it wasn't my place to dictate what she wore. It would only happen once. Her clothes were in the dryer, after all. Rather than confronting her, I headed off to my office. I didn't want to look at her. Didn't want to investigate the curves the slip had formed around her figure. The thoughts danced around in my head, but I forced it out. As I walked by, I saw something on her back, just above her shoulder blade. A tattoo. I didn't get a great look at it, but it made me think of Chinese or Japanese symbols. Peace, hope, prosperity, whatever. That wasn't it. I didn't think it was an Asian language. Walking down the hall, I remembered something. Last night, she'd been moving a load of her laundry. She'd already done it. Her clothes had already been washed, which only meant one thing. Following Gilligan's example, I hid behind my office door alongside the wet Labrador and sighed with relief. Like a thorn in my brain, the tattoo persisted. It looked familiar. It wasn't until I'd sat down at my desk and flipped through the cave pictures that I suspected what the symbol might be. At first, I didn't believe it. I couldn't allow myself to think of such preposterous ideas. Except it kept returning. The problem was I didn't get a great look at it. I'd only seen it in passing. Part of me wanted to get a picture of it so I could compare them. The longer I thought about it, the less I believed it was another language. I'd convinced myself that it was one of the symbols drawn on the cave walls. Trying to distract myself, I stared at some flies on my screen. I couldn't help thinking about the slip, in part because she'd taken me by surprise, and because I wanted to understand her motive. A part of me wondered if I could get a better look at her tattoo without putting myself in a compromising situation. I considered asking her about it too, bringing it up in casual conversation, but without any myself, I didn't know how I'd broach the subject. Catherine had a couple of butterflies on her ankle, but I didn't know if that would be enough to start a conversation. By the time I'd gone back downstairs, she'd found some other clothes. Shortly after that, Bev came through the door, and I wrapped her in the biggest hug. I could tell by the look on her face and the way she held her shoulders that she'd had a horrible day. "I think I'm going to bed," she groaned. "I still feel awful." I followed her upstairs, prepared to do anything she needed. She didn't go straight to bed. Instead, she detoured to the bathroom. I stopped before the doorway, allowing her some privacy. Shortly after that, the shower began running, and I went to the closet to fetch a robe. Steam covered the mirror. Her clothes were in a puddle on the floor. Ordinarily, this would have been a great scene for me. Under the current circumstances, it wasn't as exciting. The last thing I wanted to do was approach her with romantic intent, especially when she didn't feel well. I placed the robe on the hook. Thanks, she said. If I still feel like this tomorrow, I'll have to call out. I agreed, helped her into the shower, and then stepped out. How's she doing? Felicia's voice came from nowhere, startling me. I hadn't noticed her there. Oh, she's going to bed early. Still struggling. She nodded. Sorry to hear it. If there's anything I can do, let me know. Lying on the bed, fully dressed, I waited for her. She took a long time. I anticipated helping her again, but before long my eyes grew heavy, and the Sandman came. The limbs of elder trees cracked on hollow bones, their fingers clawed in the dark. Every step took me further into the strange forest. Howls sounded from the distance, wolves or coyotes. Beneath me the ground trembled, splitting a line of earth between my feet. Fire bubbled from below, red-hot lava that flowed from the crevice, scorching everything in its path. I ran as far and as fast as I could, but the embers carried. They closed the distance on me. From the flames came an unscorched hand. A woman's hand. I woke with a start. Even in the dark, I knew Beverly had already climbed in bed beside me. Her gentle purr filled the silence. Burdened by the dream, I couldn't fall back asleep. For a long time, I stared at the ceiling, hoping it would dissipate like most nightmares do. I must have fallen back asleep because Beverly had made it to the toilet without me noticing. The retching that followed concerned me. I'm going to be reading a little bit more in my book, Ruin. I'm currently on chapter 5. Let me get comfortable. Wait, I don't think how far this chair goes back. Makes me a little nervous. Escorting her to the car, I glanced over my shoulder. Felicia stood in her bedroom window. I could have sworn I'd seen a smirk across her face before she closed the curtains. As I got behind the wheel, I realized we hadn't had a chance to update her, and I decided I'd call her from the emergency room. As luck would have it, the traffic proved to be horrendous. We stopped on the side of the road twice so she could puke. There wasn't enough time for me to hold her hair. The door had barely opened both times. Clutching the wheel, watching traffic crawl, I considered the possibility of another baby. It didn't seem likely. We'd had such a difficult time conceiving Bobby. I didn't think we could have another. Besides, not all the symptoms lined up. When she was pregnant, the morning sickness hadn't been that bad. Stubborn like her father, she refused to let me drop her off at the door. She insisted that we park, claiming that dropping people off at the door was for gunshot victims or car accidents. The emergency room was overrun with various injuries and illnesses. The overwhelming scent of cleaning products burned my nostrils. The man beside me coughed, a bronchial, wet cough that made me wince, and of course he didn't cover his mouth. I imagined I, too, would be sick in short order, if not for the man beside me coughing onto the side of my face, certainly from Bev. She looked worse than she had the day before. I rubbed her back, hoping they'd give her something, and some peace of mind. Sitting in the waiting room, I pondered the meaning of and irony of calling it an emergency room because nobody seemed to be moving. In fact, we had a better flow at our local pizza joint. It took them 4 hours to see us. When they did, they asked questions about prior history, medications, and drugs, none of which had anything to do with the problem at hand. We sat through the interrogation. Part of me hoped she'd spew on their shoes so they'd get a sense of urgency. They ran a handful of tests, hoping they'd find something in her blood. They hinted that she could have caught the flu, but the list of symptoms didn't match. A large cotton swab jammed into her nostril, making her angry. The doctor returned with a handful of papers, but they apparently weren't the news we were expecting. We aren't going to have the results right away. The lab is really backed up right now. We're going to release you, and when we have the results, we'll give you a call and go from there. If the symptoms worsen, please come back. Until then, lots of fluids and plenty of rest. Typical of the American healthcare system, we left disappointed. I nearly carried her to the car. Thankfully, she didn't puke on the way home. As we drove back, I remembered the grin on Felicia's face. I wondered if I'd only been seeing things. A trick of the light, perhaps. The possibility of her being happy about my wife's downfall didn't seem likely. They got along well. Part of me couldn't help wondering if her past wasn't the only secret she'd been holding. Once, in our driveway, I ran around the car and helped her out. It reminded me of the third trimester of her pregnancy. She needed help with everything from simple showers to tying her shoes. We were halfway up the stairs when Felicia joined us. Bev asked, "What do you think is wrong with me?" I shrugged. "I'm a lawyer, not a doctor." With a little effort, we hoisted her into bed and covered her with a blanket. "I'll make her some soup," Felicia said. I put on a brave smile, hoping that it might be an allergy or a virus, but there were endless possibilities. I considered looking up her symptoms online, but thought better of it. That always seemed like a horrible idea to me. Every symptom could lead to a misdiagnosis, or put horrible ideas in my head. She groaned. I turned on our bedroom TV and shuffled through the stations until I found the Hallmark channel. She'd always liked those romance movies. They brought her comfort. For a while I sat on the edge of the bed, feigning interest in the movie. I waited patiently for Felicia to return with the soup, and planned to feed her, if I had to. Thankfully, it didn't come to that. Most of it remained untouched, because she'd fallen asleep shortly after. The day's exhaustion hit me like a truck. My plan to investigate the nanny's background further had been foiled by what I assumed was an oncoming illness. I lay beside her, trying to fall asleep. It didn't happen. My thoughts were racing. I'd considered everything from cancer to zombie contagion. If she'd been infected by something like that, I didn't like my odds. After a while, I gave up on sleeping and dragged myself to my office, where I sat at my computer, not working, not browsing the internet. I wasn't doing much of anything. My eyelids were heavy. I thought that I might fall asleep at my desk. A subtle knock came from the door, one so light I barely heard it over the raging river of my thoughts. Hoisting myself from the chair and dragging across the room, I opened the door. The familiar scent of black opium lingered, Bev's favorite perfume, but it wasn't her. Felicia stepped into my office and closed the door. Light glimmered off her black dress. The cut in the front left little to the imagination. "Are you feeling okay?" Her voice seemed softer than normal. The dress seemed out of character. In the few days I'd known her, I'd never seen her wear one. "What are you wearing?" I asked. This made her giggle. "This old thing," she chuckled. I recalled how little luggage she had. Although I didn't want to admit it, the black opium brought back fond memories of Beverly and I on a ski trip we'd once taken. She stepped closer, speaking softly. "I've been worried about you. All that stress of being a lawyer, having a toddler, and now your sick wife. I can't imagine." I took 2 steps back, bumping into my desk. Sitting on it, I acted as if it were on purpose. "Now isn't a great time, Felicia. I have a lot on my plate." Gilligan, who had been in the corner, stood up, her lips lifting to reveal sharp teeth. A low growl developing, barely audible. She continued, ignoring her, as if she didn't exist at all. "You got a lot of weight on your shoulders. There must be something I can do to help." Somewhere in the deep recesses of my mind, I knew if I didn't move, I'd make an enormous mistake. Even a man with a happy, loving wife isn't immune to temptation. The fact that she looked a lot like Beverly helped immensely. I couldn't deny that I found her attractive, because their similarities were staggering, and I think she knew that and even used it to her advantage. I had to think quickly. "If you'd like to help, a glass of whiskey would go a long way." I almost had a Freudian slip and said "far away" instead. She looked disappointed, as if I'd taken away her power with a single sentence. She grimaced at the idea before walking down the hall. Little did she know that I kept a bottle in my desk. My plan didn't extend beyond buying myself more time. Running into the bedroom seemed too obvious. If we were going to play cat and mouse, I'd have to be crafty, clever even. I'd have to play into her hand some, if I intended on getting what I wanted, the information. I stole a glance in the corner where my office chessboard sat. Again, it reminded me of the game we were playing, and I had a feeling I had an advantage. It didn't take her long to return with 2 glasses. The idea of drinking with her unsettled me, but I took it anyway. It wasn't until I'd taken my first sip that I had an intriguing idea, one that hadn't come to me before. I couldn't let those glasses leave my office. Couldn't let her wash them. Fingerprints. She continued flirting with me. Gilligan lay beside a trunk in the corner, looking around the edge. At every opportunity I mentioned Beverly. I didn't want her to forget about my wife. I didn't want her to get the wrong idea. If I finished it, I was afraid that she might try refilling my glass. I was also afraid she might place her lips in the place her lips in the dishwasher. Place it in the dishwasher. Place hers in the dishwasher. When we had little more than a thimbleful left, I put it down. Before she could put her lips on it again, I took it and placed it on the desk. I need to show you something. It's one of my favorite things. On our way out of my office, she glanced over her shoulder. I knew what she'd been looking at. When she wasn't paying attention, I clicked the lock on the door and closed it behind me. Downstairs, above the mantelpiece, I showed her a painting I'd accumulated from a client. I represented a painter named Lauren Vaughn at the start of her career, which had blossomed in popularity since. There'd been a dispute concerning commissions at her first gallery show. That was the polite way of saying they'd shafted her. This painting, right here, it's one of my favorite things in the house. The painter, Lauren, did this masterpiece while going through what I can only describe as hostile negotiations. I don't claim to know much about art, but this one really spoke to me. She stared at it for a second. It's a bit grim, don't you think? If it depicted a pile of bodies, presumably from a plague, lying on one of the bare-chested women was an infant suckling at the breast of an infected, presumably dead woman. She nodded. It's a little bleak for my taste. Speaking of taste, do you want another drink? We left our glasses upstairs. I shook my head. No, I think I'm done for tonight. I don't want to get carried away in case Bev needs me tomorrow, you know? Before she could protest, I'd already turned my back. Good night. Oh, hi, friends. I'm just reading some Ruin. I really can't, you know, pitch it to you guys because you guys already know. You guys have already read it, I think. It's hot in here. Oh, keep reading. Well, alrighty then, Brenda. Put me right in my place. Chapter 6. The following day, Beverly got out of bed, but she didn't stay out for long. She ate breakfast, called the doctor's office for an update, but otherwise did very little. They still had more tests to do, and they assured her they'd call when they knew something. At the breakfast table, she looked pallid and thin. She sipped a cup of coffee, staring at me over its edge. I'm not going in today. I didn't think she would. Tired eyes stared back at me. I checked on the baby. He isn't up yet. Most of her breakfast had gone untouched. Under other circumstances, I wouldn't have had a problem finishing it. Considering we didn't know what she had, I didn't want to take any chances catching whatever it was, if it were contagious. I think I've had enough fun, she said, getting to her feet. Clutching her hand in mine, I assisted her up the stairs. There you go, I said, trying to be supportive. I didn't like how quickly she'd gone downhill. She looked awful, and I hoped the doctors would have answers quickly. Almost there. Tucking her back into bed, I kissed the top of her head. I wondered if we were going to be back in the hospital by the end of the night. I didn't want to tell her that. I didn't have the heart to say anything negative. I tried reminding myself that they'd told her to rest and relax. I didn't want to think about the fact that her future lied in the clasp of a broken system. The TV flickered, but she wasn't looking at it. She stared at the wall. I feel horrible, Robert, she said in a whisper. I know. She waved that off. Not that. I mean, I can't work. Can't help around the house. You and Felicia are taking on all the responsibility while I'm just laying here. I stopped her. Don't say that. You're recovering. Again, she asked what I thought it might be. I didn't know. There are a lot of viruses out there, honey. I think they call them rhinoviruses. Like I said before, I didn't go to medical school. I'm not good when it comes to anatomy, and you already know I don't care much for blood. I went to law school because rules make sense to me. She scoffed. You're a lawyer. Loopholes make sense to you. We both laughed. When she was comfortable, I stepped into the hall where I looked both ways. Felicia wasn't in sight. Her bedroom door wasn't open either. I wasn't sure if she'd already gotten up or if she'd slept in. Tiptoeing, I moved down the hallway where I unlocked my office door and slid inside. The glasses were still on the desk where I'd left them. From the floor, I grabbed an old briefcase. I hadn't used it in ages and stuffed them inside. I dropped a yellow legal pad inside as a prop to be more believable if I were to get caught. The heels on my dress shoes clicked as I walked down the hallway, passing by her door. I listened. Nothing. Music thumped from downstairs. When I got to the first floor, I found Felicia holding the baby and singing him a song with a bottle held to his mouth. Standing in the doorway, I listened to her sing. She wasn't bad. As I stood there, I wondered if I could pick her voice out of a crowd. Stepping in, I said, "There he is, the big fella." Placing the briefcase on the floor, I took my son from her. He cooed in my arms. I got lost in those cute eyes and chubby cheeks. "Are there any updates? Is she feeling better?" I shook my head. "She spoke to the doctors, but the samples haven't come back. I hope it's just a virus." Bobby bounced in my arms for a few minutes. I couldn't help looking down at the briefcase between my feet and thinking about its content. The thought thrilled me a bit, like a well-kept secret. Before long, I returned the baby to her. As I walked toward the door, I noticed something splotched on the wall. At a closer look, it appeared to be mold. I told myself I'd take care of it when I got back. Even as I stepped outside, I wondered if I trusted her with my son. She hadn't done anything inherently dangerous yet. In the car, I placed the case on the passenger seat and stared at the house. It felt like my life had become an episode of The Twilight Zone. The phone rang and rang and rang. Eventually, Nancy answered. "Robert, tell me you've got something. Anything." This made me chuckle. "I take it you're not having much luck, huh?" She groaned. "I checked out the references you sent me. Turns out 2 or 3 are bogus. The third one didn't answer." She tapped her finger against something. "I can try it again later." She must have counted on acing the interview. Nancy added, "She did. That's how she got the job." It wasn't exactly what happened. Beverly had interfered, giving her the job and undercutting me. "You'll be happy to know that I have a set of fingerprints. If your police connection can run them, that is." She chuckled. "Oh, Lonnie owes me a favor. I caught his ex-wife, cheating on him. Followed her around for about 3 hours before she bedded her yoga instructor. One of the easiest jobs I ever had, between you and me." I didn't know how else to explain my thoughts, but I gave it a try. "Hey, if I tell you something, promise not to judge me." "Ooh, sounds juicy. What is it? Conspiracy? Aliens? Lizard people?" I couldn't help laughing at the sheer lunacy. "Well, might as well be. I think she's connected to the ruins in Old Pine Valley. I have no evidence, but I can't shake the feeling that she's involved." "Interesting." "It could only be because I saw her on the same day the news broke, but something tells me there's more. I'm not sure if she knows something or if she's hiding something. Meet me at the spot. Bring the fingerprints." Hello. Hello, friends. I'm reading from my book, Ruin. One more, you say? Okay, one more. Chapter 7. An array of stars poked through the blackened sky. A slow tune rambled on the radio as I stared at the empty street ahead, watching as yellow markers drifted by. Road hypnosis. I'd heard of it before. My mind wandered. I didn't think it had anything to do with the things Nancy had mentioned. I did, however, believe that if I'd found something on her, I would have given up the search by now. It was the lack of information that compelled me to continue, because then I believed she might have something to hide. The song on the radio lulled, and I caught myself at the last second closing my eyes. I jerked the wheel to correct myself and rolled the window down, allowing the cold air to caress my face. I saw coffee in my near future. The stress and exhaustion wore on me. To wake myself up, I flipped through the stations, looking for something heavier. After a few minutes, I found some rock and turned up the volume to a piercing level. I tried to remember if there were any gas stations between my house and the ruins. I couldn't recall. If there were, I planned on stopping to get something. During law school, we used to do Adderall to stay up all night. It had been the secret to finishing all our research and casework. I hadn't had any in a long time and wasn't even sure if I could find any now. The thought crossed my mind, but I had too much to lose. My eyes were still heavy, and I slapped myself across the face to keep myself up. I had noticed how much sleep I'd missed, stressing over Bev. Some of me felt guilty for running off into the night while she was still sick. Felicia ran through my mind too. I tried to figure out if she was a threat to my family or not. She hadn't done anything to make me believe so, but she wasn't acting normal either. I'd been a lawyer for long enough to gain a few enemies. It seemed possible that someone might have placed her inside my house to spy on me, but I couldn't imagine why. I wasn't working on any high-profile cases, nothing with political interest or celebrities. Sitting on the side of the road, I noticed Nancy's Suburban. Standing in the headlight beams, she looked as intimidating as ever. Stepping out myself, I checked our surroundings. We were alone. I slid the briefcase out of the passenger seat and passed it to her. A stiff breeze rustled her short gray hair. Some situation you found yourself in, huh? I chuckled, because I didn't know what else to do. Yeah, it's something all right. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. I've gone over every possibility, but I don't know why someone would bother spying on me, if that's what's going on. The only thing that I can imagine is that it was a coincidence. That she really does just look a lot like Beverly, and doesn't have a social media. It could be that she's innocent, and that we're chasing our tails. The bluest eyes I'd ever seen cut right through me. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's run the prints and see what comes back. Then we can speculate about her motives, if any. Rubbing the back of my neck, I said, "Do you think I've gone too far?" She shook her head. "You're protecting your family." I hadn't thought of it that way. I'd considered that I'd become obsessed, like some failed detective. At times she felt like a case I couldn't solve, the one that kept me up at night, haunting me. She slid the case into the back seat. "What do you say we go and check out this cave?" The headlights of the Suburban died, replaced by a single flashlight beam. Above, a network of stars twinkled. If not for the eerie woods, it would have been a nice night. Together we wandered through the trees. With her beside me, I didn't feel as concerned as I had the last time. The wind blew through the branches, rustling the leaves. As I said before, I'm not sure why I feel like this place is connected, but I do. I think this might be a part of the mystery. That's why we're here. Maybe I can bring you some peace of mind, or maybe I can help you figure out why you feel that way. The closer to the cave we got, the more unsettled I became. It had a presence, something that brought forth a primal fear in me. I didn't know if it was because of the darkness and the fact that I didn't go out late at night anymore, or if there was something paranormal going on. I tried to distract myself. There was this tattoo on her shoulder, but I didn't get a great look at it. It reminded me of the drawings. I motioned ahead toward the cave. I'd have to get a closer look, but I think it might have been similar to one of the symbols on the wall. Interesting. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. Something small skittered through the woods, making me jump. My heightened paranoia grew. Nancy said, "Take it easy there, Robert." "Sorry, I'm just a bit jumpy." I didn't want to tell her that. I felt like someone had been watching us. I also didn't want to tell her that I thought something paranormal may be afoot, because I thought she might think I'm crazy. In all the years I'd known her, I'd never known Nancy to be anything but a logical, no bullshit woman. She didn't take me as one to believe in ghosts or alien conspiracies. The cave unraveled in front of us. Stepping inside, it felt much smaller than the first time. My heart rate escalated as a wave of claustrophobia I'd never experienced before crashed over me like a tidal wave. Fighting back hyperventilation, I tried convincing myself that the walls closing in on us was all just in my head. It became increasingly difficult to breathe, as if there were pressure on my chest. My palms became clammy, and the room began to spin. "Robert?" she called. Her voice could have come from another galaxy. Her cold hand took mine as my vision elapsed into a pinprick. "Robert?" she called. It was the last thing I heard before everything went black. Chanting, dancing around a firelight. The cave is full. A part of the wall moves. It looks like clay, shaping and reshaping itself. The tribe continues to sing. Some watch. Most don't. A hand stretches from the wall, reaching, reaching. "I thought I lost you there for a second," Nancy said with her hand on my shoulder. "You're all right. I think you had a panic attack." The frigid wall pressed against my back, bringing the world back into reality. I blacked out. She nodded. When you started getting woozy, you thumped your noggin and went down like a ton of bricks. I checked to make sure you didn't have a concussion. Might be a good idea to get checked out. The memory of sitting with Bev in the emergency room returned. We'd been there far too long and didn't get any answers, only a promise of something down the line. I had no intention of going back. Even just my back touching the wall brought me discomfort. The thought of jerking away from it came over me, but I didn't want Nancy to be suspicious. I wanted nothing more to do with the cave, didn't want to research it any further, and certainly didn't want to return. Bad things came from this cave, I muttered. Although I couldn't explain it, I had a feeling that the visions were real. Something had come from the cave, made from clay and dirt, a being that pretended to be human. I couldn't explain my vision to Nancy, couldn't wrap my head around what I'd seen. Desperately, I tried pushing the thought out of my mind. The only thing I wanted was to distance myself from the cave forever. Groaning in slight pain, I tried getting up. Nancy hoisted me to my feet. Easy, buddy. You took one hell of a fall. Are you sure you want to go? Limping toward the exit, I said, I've never wanted anything more. That's my book, Ruin. That was chapter 7. Thank you. Thank you. You're far too kind. Did I miss anything? No, not really. All right. It is hot in my office. Oh, good, good, good. I can answer a couple of questions if you have anything. If not, I think I'm going to head into a cooler part of the house. The book is available on Kindle and Amazon and all the other StephanieJamesPublishing.com. That's who put it out. Stephanie James. It's a part of a collection called Prepping Down the Rabbit Hole. It's like choose your own novel adventures. It's kind of an interesting concept. Do I think there will be a sequel to that? Probably not, but maybe. Hmm. Yeah, the cave is pretty interesting. Yeah, I've never really had any luck with sequels. For whatever reason, my brain gets stumped, and I don't know. Thus far, I haven't completed any sequels ever. All of my books are kind of standalones. Um, I don't know. I'll think about it, but I think if Stephanie were to propose the idea, I might, I might negotiate something. I don't know. I don't really know what else could or would happen in this story in particular. Where else these characters would go? Yeah. Hmm. I see. Like another incident surrounding the cave. Well, I did have an idea at some point. So, as you know, later on in the book, there's a character named Wendy who's like sort of a unintentional psychic. I thought that she might make an appearance in another book somewhere, and also I have this great idea for a short story that revolves around that painter that I was just talking about. I haven't gotten to work on it yet. I'm busy. I got too many projects and not enough time. As of right now, I'm currently working on the screenplay for another film project. I wrote a short story in my newest collection, Redacted Tales, which I don't have a copy of right here. The very first short story is called Nora, and it's about a one-eyed doll who's possessed, sort of, and this struggling writer who accumulates her from a flea market. So that is the story that I'm turning into a screenplay, and we hope to start filming that soon, maybe next month or so. The thing is, it's not going to be like Cathedral. It likely won't be that long. Um, there are like stipulations to certain film festivals where you're more likely to get picked up for short fiction, short films if they're like less than 20 minutes, where Cathedral was 22 and some change. Yeah, I'm thinking about wrapping it up myself. Well, you have a good night. Hello, everybody. I'm going to read a little bit from my book, Ruin. I've been reading this over the last few days. So this is put out by Stephanie James Publishing. It's this sort of spider-webbed series where all of the books are like choose your own adventure and they all kind of lean off of each other. It's called Creeping Down the Rabbit Hole. That's the series name. And I'm in there with a bunch of really great authors. So highly encourage you to check them out. Chapter 8. When I woke up, Beverly wasn't in bed beside me. I got up, looked around, and didn't see her in the bedroom. It surprised me because she'd been bedridden for so long. In my search for her, I came upon a note on the nightstand. I pulled it close, letting my eyes adjust. I'm feeling a bit better. I thought I'd go to work. The doctors called, and unfortunately, they don't have any further information. The tests all came back negative. I love you. See you tonight. Visions of the tribe dancing around the fire returned, the hand that breached the wall. All of it seemed so real, so vivid. For a moment I pondered what it all meant. The only thing I could think of was that I'd seen that native girl at the gas station. I thought maybe that had played a role in my subconscious, creating some terrifying dream. Beside the note, I found my cell phone. There weren't any messages or missed calls. As I stared at the empty screen, I noticed I hadn't plugged it in either and found my battery at 23%. Groaning, I hobbled to the shower. The hot water cascaded on me, helping me feel more awake. I tried thinking about anything else. The drive home had been a blur, possibly from the thump of my head and the exhaustion. The shower helped to revive me, but I still didn't have the motivation to do much. The thought of going to work seemed as impossible as a marathon. I called in. Sitting on the edge of my bed in my towel, I thought about what I'd do for the day. I could only think of one thing: sleeping. For a while I lay in bed, but sleep didn't come. The hand protruding from the wall haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, it hid behind my eyelids, waiting for me. Remembering such vivid dreams in such clear detail hadn't been common in my adult life. Gilligan seemed to pick up on my unsettled state. She jumped up on the bed, which was rare. I allowed it. She nuzzled up against me, my hand feeling the soft white fur, pausing when I could feel her heartbeat. I lay there for, I'm assuming, 20 minutes, letting her calming pulse dissipate a degree of my anxiety. My joints crackled and popped as I got up and fetched my clothing. I didn't want to go downstairs yet, but I didn't know what else to do. I wanted to check on the baby, and wanted to get some coffee. Hell, the whole pot. Then I thought I'd be able to think more clearly. Gilligan hopped down from the mattress, moving to the gap between the bed and the wall as I exited the room. In the kitchen, Felicia worked in silence. Bobby sat in a high chair with fruit salad in disarray before him. When he saw me, he flexed his little hands, asking to be picked up. I lifted him in my arms and cherished him by flooding him with kisses and pokes that made him giggle. Felicia looked over her shoulder. Have a rough night? I wondered what she knew. Why do you ask? She flipped a pancake. You came in late. I thought you might have stopped off at the highball. You didn't look so hot then either. I was surprised to learn she knew about the dingy little bar that law students frequented. I hadn't been in ages, though. Part of me didn't want to answer her question. The other part didn't want her to think I'd gotten drunk and driven home. Scraping my memory, I tried to recall if I'd ever mentioned the highball before. I didn't. I wondered if Beverly might have brought it up, but doubted it. No, I didn't go to the bar last night. Those days are behind me. I think I might have a touch of whatever's going around. I didn't feel too well last night. Still don't, really, she nodded. Coffee's on. Bobby slipped back into the high chair and resumed playing with his strawberries. There wasn't enough coffee in the world, but I poured the first of what I assumed would be many cups. I doubled up on sugar and cream. From the corner of my eye, I watched her. I couldn't help it. Something about her set my teeth on edge. Every day I trusted her a little less. To me, it felt like we were playing some sort of game. I knew she was up to no good. She knew that I knew, but couldn't act like I knew. The chess club crossed my mind. The games we'd played. The stakes. Hungry? She asked. The thought of eating made me nauseous. Not really. The night's panic attack came back to me. I'd never been the anxious type, although I'd had one once before. Once, while studying for an exam, I'd stayed up late for weeks leading up to it, and then, boom, Adderall had been involved too. Getting up, I wandered over to the pot. Felicia's eyes followed me. There wasn't any guise of pretending. I wanted to ask her why, but didn't. Instead, I poured the second cup. It poured and poured and poured. My vision got spotty. Colors danced. The cup clattered on the counter, and I gripped the edge as everything spun. A voice came from the distance. Wow, you really must not be feeling well. From then, everything moved in snapshots, as if pieces of the film had been cut out of sequence. We were standing in the kitchen at first, then we struggled to get up the stairs. She was under my arm, holding me up. The bird cawed somewhere in the distance. George's "your move" wasn't acknowledged. We were in the bedroom. Her clothes were in a pile on the floor. My clothes joined. Her impossibly cold body pressed against me, but her face wasn't in focus. The unmistakable imitation camera sound went off. I tried to focus, tried to hold on to the consciousness as slippery as it seemed, before everything went black. I saw the mysterious tattoo as she climbed out of bed. It matched one of the drawings on the cave wall. This time, I was certain. When I awoke again, my body ached all over. The light burned my eyes. The TV played, and I had no recollection of turning it on. Those snapshots of Felicia and I in bed together seemed like a fever dream. Again, I found myself looking for Beverly. Her letter remained on the nightstand, assuring me that it hadn't been a dream. It hadn't been a dream. It had been a nightmare. An anchor on the news droned on. I couldn't pay attention because I spotted my clothes on the floor. Along with that sight came a sweeping sense of guilt. I wasn't sure, but I believed that I had an affair. I also thought that I might have been drugged. Hello, everyone. Hello. Sorry if I missed any comments. I'm in the zone. AutoZone. Chapter 9. Shame and embarrassment shrouded me. I lay in bed, struggling to move. I dragged myself out of the bedroom and into the bathroom, where I turned on the shower. Hot water cascaded through my hair. The steam covered my tears. The water couldn't get hot enough. Soap couldn't wash her earthy scent off my skin. What little I could recall played through my head like a slideshow on a broken projector. Fractured images rotated in the kaleidoscope of my mind, initiating an unwanted arousal. Long after the water went cold, I couldn't leave the shower. It wasn't until Bev called through the door that I escaped my daze. Are you all right? My hand moved from its unaware position. quickly up to my hair. I turned away from the bathroom door to the wall of the shower. I didn't know how to answer. Didn't know if I could. Only a lie came to my mind. I think I've come down with the same thing you did. I feel horrible. The water stopped, leaving the bathroom in an eerie silence. Lying to Bev wasn't high on my priorities, but I couldn't think of what else to do. I couldn't explain to her because I didn't know what had happened. From the bathroom, I slipped into the bedroom and laid down. Standing over me, I noticed color had returned to her face. She looked as though she'd lost weight, but otherwise she looked good. Sorry you're not feeling well. It's making the rounds. I hope you don't get it as bad as I did. Tears stood in my ducts. Lurking, I fought back as hard as I could. I didn't want to cry, not in front of her. She kissed my head and promised that she'd bring me soup. As soon as she left the room, I wept. Someone on the news rambled as I whimpered like a scolded child. I could do nothing else, only cry while staring at the ceiling. I must have fallen asleep before she returned. When I awoke, Beverly was nowhere to be found. I looked around in a cloud of confusion. It wasn't until I saw the alarm clock that I realized I'd slept through the night. She likely returned to work. There wasn't any other note waiting for me. There wasn't a text message either. Nothing. Not even the bowl of soup. I'd never felt so lonely. Facing Felicia filled me with a level of dread I'd never experienced before. My body ached as I placed my feet on the cold floor. My head swam like a hangover. Even from downstairs, Bobby's shrill cry pierced my skull. Getting up, I stalked toward the door. The hallway was empty. Downstairs, Felicia sat on the couch, bouncing him on her knee. My heart hammered. The thump of my pulse filled my temples as I moved closer. She looked up from the baby at me. The words caught in my throat. The first time I tried. What did you do to me? A sly smile crossed her face. Patient, gentle, she placed my son beside her. On the edge of the couch sat her phone. She grabbed it and opened a picture, verifying that what I feared was true. There we were, naked. She scrolled past it, exposing another and another, each more provocative than the last. Fear replaced my anger. She placed the phone down. You're done looking into my background. Are we clear? My jaw fell open. If you were to continue, your wife would find one of these pictures plastered to her vanity. Are we clear about that? I tried thinking of something to say. Anything. Nothing came. Are we clear? The once calm, rational tone had vanished. A seriousness covered her face, which I'd never seen from her before. It scared me. I nodded. I didn't want it to come to this, but you're relentless. That must be why you became a lawyer. I didn't know what to say, so I kept my mouth shut. The evidence against me looked damning, and I wasn't certain Beverly would believe my side of the story. It wasn't a risk I was willing to take, either. She lay down on the couch. Don't try anything you'll regret, Robert. We'll pretend this never happened. One question stuck in my mind above all others. Why are you doing this to me? An unhinged laugh escaped her mouth. Why do you think? Braving a look at my son, I said, Because you want the baby? She shook her head. No, if I wanted your baby, I could have stolen him days ago, and you would have never found me. No, he's cute and all, but that's not it. I threw my hands up. Is it money you want? She shook her head. As she got up, I couldn't think of any other reason she'd have taken the job. I couldn't imagine what her motive was. Before she'd completely walked by, she stopped. Call your watchdog Nancy and tell her that her services have been terminated. What is it you want? I called after her. What? My head fell in a combination of frustration and guilt. With my eyes downcast, I noticed something. On the wall, just above the trim, mold had begun growing. Hello. Hello, everyone. I am currently reading my book, Ruin. It's available on Amazon. It's available at StephanieJamesPublishing.com. Chapter 10. Staring up into the darkness, those pictures circulated through the fog in my brain. The feel of her against the palms of my hands. I couldn't stop thinking about her blackmail and how she used it to control me. I wanted to put on an end to it, to get her away from my family. If I tried firing her, I knew she'd use them. Beverly's light snore stopped. I turned around, expecting to see her awake. Her eyes were still closed. All at once they shot open. A gagging sound commenced, while spittle flew from her mouth. Grabbing her shoulders, I tried maneuvering. Panic struck her face. Hoisting her up, I turned her to her side, where she vomited. She grasped for breath, coughed, and choked so much that tears formed in her eyes. Out of breath myself, I patted her back, trying my best not to look at the puddle spreading on the sheets and floor. She groaned. "I've been feeling better, too." "You almost choked to death on your own puke, and that's what you have to say?" I regretted my tone. "I'm sorry. You scared me, is all." Sitting up in bed, she said, "We're going back to the hospital, aren't we?" I didn't know what to say. After talking about it for half an hour, we decided that we weren't going. They hadn't done much the first time. They'd run all their tests and had come back with nothing. We tossed around some other possibilities before we'd grown tired. Then she drifted off back to sleep. Even before she'd thrown up, I couldn't sleep. I found this as an opportune moment to get out of bed and clean the mess. Wandering into the bathroom, I couldn't help wondering what Felicia might be doing in the middle of the night. I didn't think she'd sleep. I didn't think she'd be asleep. Something told me that she didn't sleep much, especially with all the scheming she did. As I got the sheets gathered, I told myself I'd have to throw them in the laundry first thing in the morning. I didn't think Beverly would have the energy to do it. I didn't want to run the machine because I wouldn't be able to put them in the dryer, and they'd sit all night. The thought of leaving them near our bedroom wasn't pleasant either because they smelled. After that, I wandered down to my office where I sat before my computer staring at the blank screen. A text message alerted me. Nancy, she'd run the fingerprints and hadn't found anything. Not only were they not in the system, but she couldn't find anything at all. Only my prints were on the cups. I tried imagining how that was possible. I wondered if she'd broken into my office and wiped them clean, but even that didn't make sense. The door was locked, and even if she had access, she couldn't have only wiped her own. I hadn't called Nancy off yet. Couldn't bring myself to do it. I wondered how she knew about her. Wondered if she'd intercepted my messages, or if they'd followed me. Or if she'd followed me, even without a car. From the very beginning, she'd been 2 steps ahead. I didn't like that. My years as a chess player should have prepared me for such situations, but they hadn't. Rather than returning any messages, I placed my phone down and stared at the wall, perplexed. Then I searched the images from the ruins again, hoping to find something that might help explain what was going on. Not much progress had been made on the story, but after scouring the internet, I found someone in the comment section of a thread who claimed to be an expert. Further research proved this to be true. The man on the news had wrongfully called them hieroglyphs. They were petroglyphs. An archaeologist and Navajo native named Shae Nadu claimed that they were drawings left behind by the Navajo tribesmen. He planned on doing further research when he got the chance. With this information, I searched for other petroglyphs. They had similarities. One thing I didn't find was that bizarre symbol. It wasn't just on the wall of the cave, but also tattooed on Felicia's back. It didn't take long to find an email address for Chayton. Before I sent the message, I thought that she might have my computer bugged. I tried not to think about it, tried not to get paranoid. I sent off an email and stared at the screen as if he were sitting by his computer waiting to solve my problems. Leaning back in my chair, I ran my fingers through my hair with a sigh. From down the hall came Bobby's coos. Grateful she wasn't downstairs, I moved quietly. I didn't want her to hear me. One of the steps squealed under my weight. If she heard me, she didn't respond. The cap crackled off a new bottle of bourbon. My first sip burned. The second wasn't as bad. I took it upstairs. My nerves hindered my ability to plan. Alcohol silenced them. I could sense more bad things were coming. A woman like that wouldn't hold blackmail over someone like me for fun. I pondered her motive repeatedly and couldn't come up with anything. I'd even considered the possibility that she'd been attached to a case of mine, but nothing stood out. Her name wasn't familiar to me. She wasn't in the police system, which meant she didn't have a criminal record. Also, the strangest of all, she looked impossibly similar to my wife. The possibility that she'd gotten plastic surgery to look like her crossed my mind, but even that didn't make sense. The door clicked behind me, and I sat down behind my computer. The ping of the response email startled me as I poured myself another round. It didn't take long before the expert and I were exchanging information. I sent him a picture of the symbol. He responded with 2 words, Yi Naldlushi. They meant nothing to me without Google. The results horrified me. Skinwalker. Chapter 11. The expert and I corresponded for hours, discussing the caves and everything the drawings might represent. He claimed that he knew little about the symbol, but had a person who might know more. He wanted to show the picture to his friend before getting back to me. He doubted they were familiar with the story because they didn't have a TV. I thanked him repeatedly, grateful that he'd taken the time to respond. After that, he said he had to get to bed because he had a big presentation the following day. 2 drinks led to 3. I found myself staring at the wall, wondering if I'd been entertaining the ramblings of a nutcase. At this, I began searching folklore, hoping to find information that would either put the idea to bed or maybe turn me into a believer. The bird cawed, reaching through the thin walls. Queen's Gambit! I shook my head, mentally detesting him. Where do you learn this shit, George? I hated that bird. Like always, I couldn't sleep. With Gilligan at my feet, I stayed up into the morning searching skinwalkers. I wanted to know everything. After reading endlessly, I terrified myself. There were a lot of things in the lore that led me to believe that I was, in fact, dealing with a genuine skinwalker. But there were other things that made it seem impossible. In the back of my mind remained the voice of the skeptic. of the skeptic. I'd never been one to believe in ghosts, conspiracies, or monsters. They were stories, fairy tales. After Wilburn, I knew there was credibility with witchcraft, but I never entertained such things that lacked proof, yet. I found myself justifying the evidence I did have. By the time I returned to my bedroom, Beverly's alarm blurted. She got up. Again, some color had returned to her face, and she spoke with a bit of cheer. You want me to stay home today? You look horrible. Couldn't sleep again? There wasn't any point in us both being incapacitated. No, you go ahead. Between Felicia and I think we can handle it. Her curves flashed across my mind like a screenshot. Even saying her name made me uneasy, as if we had shared a secret, a filthy lie that festered below the surface. I couldn't help but noticing the obvious comparisons that come with age as she put on a shirt. She asked, Are you sure? I turned my head with guilt. Honey, I've got this under control. I don't know what it is, but I'll get through it. It's just a bout of insomnia, maybe stress. Things at work have been... I shrugged. It had nothing to do with work, and I think we both knew that. She believed that it had to do with her being sick, and certainly some of that had to be true. She didn't know about Felicia. I wasn't sure that I wanted her to know because the pictures were so damning. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, I didn't think I could convince her. I didn't think she'd believe me. I wasn't sure that I believed it. Shortly after Beverly left, I locked the bedroom door and drifted off to sleep. It wasn't a deep nor restful sleep, but it beat nothing. My body felt heavy, as if made of stone. Darkness consumed me. Through the fog came a deep, horrible cry. A baby. A forest unfolded around me as I became aware of my surroundings. It rained. My shoes stuck in the mud that gripped them together, tethering me to the unforgiving earth. One hand breached, covered in grit, followed by another and another. Somewhere in the distance came the unmistakable chant of a native tribe. As the chant grew louder, so did the baby's shrill cry. I awoke drenched in sweat. There were 2 emails on my phone. One of them came from an investment firm I'd been looking into. The other had come from my expert. He was able to come to Old Pine Valley at the end of the week, and he'd be interested in meeting me, seeing the caves for himself, and talking about my situation. A soft voice came through the door. Robert, she whispered, can we talk? Her voice sent a shiver up my spine. I didn't want to answer, didn't want to let her in the room. With no other choice, I got up and opened the door. Much to my surprise, she had the baby in her arms. I wondered if she was using him as a shield, or holding him to keep me from responding negatively. I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I'm sorry I was so brash the other night. The truth is, we all have skeletons in our closet. Skeletons? I scoffed. You drugged and blackmailed me because you have skeletons in your closet? That's a bit over the top, don't you think? My thoughts raced. I had to keep a tight grip on my tongue because I didn't want to say anything I'd regret. I didn't want anything to slip about my current plan. Remnants of that dream ran through my head. I tried to subdue my body's longing to react. A half smile covered her face, as if she knew the traces of intimacy I was trying to suppress. There are some secrets worth dying for, she said. Perhaps I'm running from an abusive ex, or part of a witness protection program. Have you considered that? They sounded like bullshit to me. Let's not do anything we'll regret, she said. I extended my arms, taking the baby. Her holding him while threatening me felt as if she were holding him over a ledge. I didn't want to consider that she might use him as a pawn in our war. The tattoo on her shoulder. It came to me like a bolt of lightning. I needed confirmation. Had to know if it was the same symbol I'd seen in the cave or not. As she meandered back down the hallway, I considered my options. I didn't think she'd willingly show me. Not now. She'd made it halfway down the hall when I called after her. Is it me you want? It stopped her. Only for a second. I wondered if I'd hit the nail on the head. If it were me that she'd been after, romantically or maliciously. I thought I caught a smirk on her face before she descended out of sight. Hello, everyone. Hello. We're currently reading the book Ruin. This is my part of the Prepping Down the Rabbit Hole series. Also, our friends Kristen and Moran, Mike Minicky, and Shae Smith are also all linked in this same series. I can answer any questions if you have any more, if you have any at all. Or I could read another chapter. The next chapter is pretty short. Oh, stop it. Stop it, you. It's one story. So, basically, Kristen has a book, Shae has a book, Mike has a book, and they're all kind of like intertwined. And funny enough, mine is the only one that doesn't have move in the title. So they're like last move, wrong move, final move. I can't remember. But mine is like the only one that doesn't have move in the title. Mine's just called Ruin. Yeah, awesome. I think if you want to, you should. I mean, obviously I can't tell you what to do, but from my understanding, our friend Jay Michael is also going to be a part of this series, and I think Amy, of course I blank on her last name, our friend Amy is also working on a book for the series. Alright, what do you say, one more chapter? One more chapter and we'll call it for now. I think I might have to get some lunch or something. I'm getting kind of hungry. The premise of the series is it's difficult to explain because the books take so many twists and turns, but more or less it revolves around this guy named Robert, or sometimes he's called Bobby, who plays chess, and he more or less gets kidnapped and encounters some pretty terrible people, and There's like a chessboard that has magical powers. Although mine kind of strays a little away from the chess part. I mean, it's mentioned a little bit, but mine doesn't revolve around chess as much as some of the other ones do. Yeah. Alright. One more chapter, guys. Chapter 12. Busy people rambled through the mall. The feeling of being watched clung to me like a wet blanket. Every 100 feet or so, I checked over my shoulder. The paranoia had grown. Even though she tried to bury the hatchet, I couldn't help feeling that she was lurking around every corner. Inside the electronics store sat a nice-looking family and a couple of salesmen. With the family sat a little kid, about 4 years old. He had his finger knuckle deep in his nostril, which almost made me laugh before a chilling thought crossed my mind. If I didn't take care of our nanny situation, I couldn't guarantee my son would make it to his age. The thought horrified me. One of the salesmen came up to me with a big, toothy grin. "What can I help you with today?" He reminded me a bit of a carny pitching a game I'd never win. I considered blowing past him, but figured I'd have to deal with him again at the register. "Cameras," I grunted. Even saying the word aloud felt gross. He nodded. Together we walked down an aisle where he showed me top-of-the-line digital cameras. Clearly, we'd had a miscommunication. "Security cameras," I clarified. That shimmering smile only disappeared for a split second before he walked me down another aisle, further in the back of the store. We stood in front of a massive box that held 6 cameras and hangers. He continued to boast about having the best quality security cameras on the market. That's when I realized he wasn't just a people pleaser, but also making commission. His happiness came at a price. Of course, he'd taken me to the most expensive item on the shelf. While he continued his speech about the set I wasn't going to buy, I reached past him and grabbed a single camera. He changed his pitch accordingly. "This is the one," I said, hoping to shut him up. Together we walked to the register, where the little boy followed us with his eyes. He wasn't mining for nose gold any longer, but content scuffing his shoes back and forth on the floor. I swiped my credit card, and the machine processed it. While I stared down at it, I had a thought. Then I shuffled my phone out of my pocket and checked it. "Sir?" the salesman said, holding out my bag. That's when I realized how she'd been playing me. My phone. There'd been a small chunk of plastic housing that had gotten clipped when I dropped it months ago. The chip wasn't there. She'd replaced my cell phone. My heart sank. "Sir?" the salesman asked. I shook my head, clearing my thoughts. "I think I'm going to need a new cell phone, too." That big smile returned. She'd played me like a fool, and I couldn't believe I'd fallen for it. She went above and beyond to make the 2 phones look identical, from the background to the contacts. I wondered if she'd been using one of the tracking apps to keep tabs on me, following my purchases through my banking app. These thoughts plagued me as I wandered across the parking lot. The phone clattered onto the pavement before I stomped on it and sent it down a manhole. It plunked in the water below. "Son of a bitch," I said, just in case anybody had been watching. My email was attached to my phone, which meant she knew about Chayton. She knew that we were closing in on her. Inside the car, I slammed my fist against the steering wheel and screamed. Spittle landed on the dashboard. For a while, I could do nothing but stare at the parking lot as the people came and went. Then I opened the box and began setting up my new phone. I was already in over my head, and I knew I needed help. I'd also lost Nancy's phone number. If she did have access to my banking statement, it meant she knew about the camera, and the phone too. Even there, I didn't have an advantage. Hmm. I think that might be where I'll stop for now. I do plan on doing another round later today, maybe 6 o'clock or so. I'm not sure yet, but take this moment to answer any questions if there are any. If not, I'll get out of here and go get some lunch, I guess. That was my book, Ruin, by the way. Ruin from Stephanie James Publishing. You can get a copy on the Zon or Kindle. It's pretty affordable too. I don't remember what the price is set at. $7.99, $8.99, something like that. It's a pretty thin book, pretty easy read. Then again, a lot of my books are kind of thin like that. I kind of write short. I really should finish the setup of the TikTok shop. It just started annoying me. Became it became a burden, kind of. I should probably finish it though. All right. Well, if nobody has anything left to say, I think I'll get out of your hair for a while. Welcome back, everybody. I'll do some reading from my book, Ruin, put out by Stephanie James Publishing. Chapter 13. Thankfully, I didn't bring the camera inside. I knew better. As I stepped in, they were both there, looking back at me. Catherine's pleasant look. What? Beverly's pleasant look contradicted Felicia's suspicion. We were both still playing. We were both still willing to play. Your move, George cawed. Shut up, I yelled at the annoying parrot. Bobby bounced in the chair as the girls sipped wine and gossiped. And they didn't know many of the same people. There wasn't much to gossip about, which made me worried. They were talking about me. What's going on, honey? Beverly asked. I shook my head. Their similarities concerned me. Sitting together on the couch, sharing a bottle of red, they looked like sisters. Not quite like twins, but close. Stepping deeper into the room, I said, It looks like you guys are having fun. I glanced at the TV screen to see what they were watching. One of those romantic comedies with Ryan Reynolds. Bev patted the seat beside her. Come, sit with us. Have some fun. Well, you must be feeling better, huh? I tried some casual biting back at the budding paranoia. The sudden turnaround in her health left me confused. Rarely did someone get that close to death's door and turn around overnight. While I pondered the smell of rotting fruit wafting through the air, I thought I'd thrown them away. I'd been about to tell Bev about the splotch of mold I'd seen when she spoke and derailed my thoughts. Come, sit with us. I couldn't think of anything I wanted to do less. I sat. The camera in the back of the car crossed my mind multiple times as I watched the movie and pretended to care. I stole glances at my new phone, knowing that she knew I'd switched it. I pressed my thoughts, trying to figure out how I'd set them up without getting caught. They weren't the most inconspicuous cameras. They were what I could afford and what I had access to. Bev put her hand on my leg. She slurred. Seems stressed lately. Is everything okay? It wasn't a conversation I wanted to have in front of Felicia. Work had been tough lately. I didn't want to lie to my wife, but didn't have a choice. Things will be fine when we go on vacation. I can't wait, Bev said. Oh, you're going to have to come with us. Myrtle Beach. Beverly threw her hands up in the air. If the glass of wine hadn't already been empty, she'd have spilled it. Felicia smiled and nodded. Sounds nice. The second, maybe the third bottle of wine came out. I watched as Felicia drank. She wasn't keeping the same pace as Beverly, which made me realize that she wasn't nearly as drunk. She wouldn't slip up and make any mistakes tonight. Too careful. Bev leaned over and whispered in my ear, Just wait till I get you upstairs. Her whisper wasn't quiet. Felicia heard and looked at us in disgust. For the millionth time, I wondered what her play was. I couldn't figure out what she wanted, what she'd been trying to accomplish. I tell you what, I'm going to head up. Come join me when you finish the movie. Disappointment covered her face. Aw, come on, stay. Hiking a thumb over my shoulder, I said, I'm going to hit the shower, and I'll be waiting for you. I gave her a wink, hoping that it would entice her a bit. When it came to drunk sex, Bev had the appetite, but lacked the follow-through. Before anything happened, she'd be snoring, and we both knew it. To keep up the image, I did shower. It didn't last long, but I mussed up my hair and changed into my pajama pants. Then I snuck down the hall, careful not to let any squeaking floorboards give me away. But behind Felicia's door, I searched through her stuff. Under ordinary circumstances, I wouldn't have done it. These weren't ordinary circumstances. She had a lot more in her bedroom since she moved. God dang it. Since she first moved in, and I wondered if she and Bev had gone shopping, probably on our dime. To get her what she needed, Beverly had a soft spot for people. I'd lost that sensibility before law school. 10 minutes later, I had my phone in my hand. The chip in the case verified, as did the home screen. I'd been duped. With the same caution, I slipped out of her bedroom down the hall. I didn't know what I had planned on doing with it, but I was glad she didn't have it. Immediately, I turned it off and pulled the battery. Chapter 14. It happened all at once. Beverly became ill again, worse than before. We still didn't have any answers. Unlike the last time, she didn't have the symptoms of a cold or a flu. This time she appeared to be experiencing something worse. It started with violent outbursts of vomiting, which we couldn't ignore. On the way to the hospital, she spiked a fever. They admitted her quickly. I sat in the lobby, pacing back and forth, waiting for answers. As I did, I couldn't help thinking that it might have been Felicia. She might have poisoned my wife. The guilt weighed on me. I wondered if telling the doctors might open an investigation into me. I couldn't afford to have them poking around right now. My phone rang, disrupting my thoughts. Chayton. What's going on? I asked, hoping he might have some insight. Well, I've come across something that you should check out. I don't know how else to explain it. I think it might be her. Gripping the bridge of my nose, I said, I would love to, but right now isn't a great time. My wife is in the hospital, and I think it might be related. I think this may be a form of retaliation. Silence came from the other end. I don't know what to do. If the police get involved, she may do something worse. She may kill me, or them. Well, I'm up against the wall here, Chayton. I felt guilty for unloading my problems on him, but I desperately wanted to unburden my frustrations. I understand. I'm going to email you some files. Look at them when you get a chance. Also, we should probably make a trip to the ruins sooner rather than later. I'll keep digging for now. I hope she gets better soon. Frowning, I shoved my phone into my pocket. Through the massive glass window, a police car came into sight. At first, I didn't think much of it. There were a lot of instances where police must come to the hospitals. It wasn't until they flipped their lights and approached me that I became concerned. My heart thundered in my chest. How can I help you, officers? They didn't look like they needed help. They looked like they wanted to bury me 6 feet deep, as if I'd committed some heinous crime. That's when I realized the hospital had called them. The woman officer spoke first. We'd like you to come downtown to the station with us for some questions. The lawyer in me didn't want to go into the police station, didn't want to answer their questions. Is that necessary? Can't I answer them right here? Even though I figured they wouldn't allow it, I had to try. I didn't want to leave Beverly alone in the hospital. The woman shook her head. I don't think that's a good idea. While they were both staring at me, I lifted my phone and called the firm. I spoke to one of my colleagues, an attorney named Danielle Ashburn. He said he'd meet me there. The cops didn't look pleased with me, but there wasn't any chance I'd go into any legal situation without representation. There were too many instances of people incriminating themselves, or the police doing unfavorable things behind closed doors. While my wife lay in the hospital bed, I sat in an interrogation room with a cup of stale coffee and 2 officers staring back at me. They tried questioning me, but I wouldn't say anything without my lawyer present. The woman wrinkled her nose at me. scrunching up her pug-looking face with judgment. The hospital says that she's ingested a rare type of poison, something you can't just find under the kitchen sink. The male officer placed his hands on the table, giving me the tough guy routine. What do you make of that? She'd been poisoned. It had been a retaliationary action against me. I tried thinking back, trying to recall when she started getting sick. The days blurred together a bit. Staring at the cop's face, I said nothing. I knew the deal. Part of me wanted to run back to Beverly. I didn't want to be with them while she lay, possibly dying. I tried not to let the tears work their way to the surface. It could be misinterpreted as an admission of guilt rather than a human response to a horrible situation. Also, I figured they'd seen my call to the law firm as an admission of guilt too, because they believed innocent people didn't need lawyers. Don't you have anything to say for yourself? He nudged. Get tired of her terrible cooking or something? Did she cheat on you? Is that it? There wasn't any presumption of innocence. I tried my best to ignore his comments. He knew my lawyer was on the way, and he wanted to get me to talk before he arrived. I couldn't let him get under my skin. I couldn't give him the response he wanted. A knock on the door allowed my lawyer to step inside. You officers wouldn't be harassing my client without me present, would you? He shot them both daggers in the eyes. His briefcase slammed on the table, making the female cop jump. The police and my lawyer went back and forth. They talked a mile a minute. There were accusations, but admittedly they didn't have much evidence. They'd mostly come to talk to me because I'd been with her the most. When we finished our talk, I killed them with the kindness, thanking them for their service while biting my tongue until it nearly bled. Neither of them looked pleased to let me go. I guess they'd been fishing for a confession. Daniel and I stood on the department's front lawn, his graying hair mussed in the wind. You didn't do this, did you? I shook my head. Like I said in there, I believe my nanny did it. Yeah, they're looking into that, he said. Judging by the looks on their faces and the way they'd come after me, I didn't believe it. They had their minds made up, and they were going to do everything in their power to prove I did it. I shook my head. I don't think they're going to find much. She's slippery, Danny. I didn't know how to explain it to him. I shrugged instead. It hit me like a brick. I need to get home. Now. What's the rush? What's going on? My car's at the hospital. What if she ran? That would leave poor Bobby all alone. Then I considered something worse than that. I wondered if she'd taken him with her. Chapter 15. The police were already there by the time we arrived. The two officers from the station stood on the front lawn, one of them with a phone in their hand. What's going on? I asked. The pug-faced cop gave me a horrible look. We're getting a warrant to search the premises. Daniel and I looked at one another. He shrugged. Together we walked up the pathway to the front door. Even before I got inside, I knew Felicia wasn't there. Sitting in the playpen, Bobby cooed with Gilligan beside him. She's not here, I told Daniel. How do you know? The house is quiet. The TV isn't on. Neither of those things were the reason, but they worked. I couldn't tell that I just knew. Premonition or instinct, I wasn't sure, but I knew she wasn't there. Daniel stayed in the living room, looking. Daniel stayed in the living room with the baby while I searched the house. The first place I checked was the downstairs bathroom. If she were still around and not tending to the baby, I figured she'd be there. I wasn't surprised at all to see the door open and the lights off. My shoes thumped up the stairs. When I got into the hall, I had the same feeling. An empty house has a certain feeling. The upstairs bathroom wasn't occupied either. Felicia's door was closed, but I wasn't surprised to find the room empty. She didn't have much stuff to begin with, and if she knew we were coming, she could have packed up quickly. Nothing. The room looked like it had never been occupied. She didn't even leave a note. Heading downstairs, I couldn't help thinking about how it made me look. It made me look like a man who'd abandoned his baby and tried to kill his wife. The stairs creaked as I walked down them. She left. She's gone. Daniel had been standing over the playpen when I approached. He turned. What do you mean she's gone? All of her things are gone. She's not here. The look Daniel gave me said everything about my defender. He didn't believe me. He didn't think there had been any Nandy. He believed I'd tried to kill Beverly and left my son alone. I know how it looks, I began. There didn't seem to be any point in finishing. He'd already made up his mind. Rather than further explaining myself, I lifted Bobby into my arms. I wandered to the front door, opened it, and called across the lawn. Go ahead, look around. She's not here. The two officers exchanged a look, one that didn't make me feel protected or served. They walked up the stairs and into the house where my lawyer awaited them. The three of them walked from room to room in search of a nanny who'd fled without a trace. There must not have been much to see because the officers looked disappointed when they returned. They gave me the same shtick they always do. They'd be back and not to leave town. I didn't have anywhere to go and didn't care if they'd be back because there wasn't anything interesting to find. I thanked my lucky stars for not leaving the poison on the kitchen counter. Shortly after they left, I packed Bobby into the car and grabbed his stroller too. We were going back to the hospital to see Beverly, and I had a few choice words for the doctors there. An upbeat pop song came over the radio, if not for a positive squeal from the back seat. I'd have turned it off. Instead, I let it play. Seething with rage, I went over everything in my head repeatedly. I couldn't stop having fights with everyone involved. Couldn't stop thinking about the position I'd been left in. The anger, the sadness, the fear, all hit me at once. Before I knew it, I was sitting at the red light, bawling my eyes out, listening to Taylor Swift. It wasn't the image I wanted to have, but the two girls in the convertible next to me must have thought it was quite the sight. Parking at the hospital proved to be horrible. Every spot seemed to be reserved for something or other. We settled for a spot in the parking garage, which seemed to be 2 miles off campus. I dried my tears with my sleeve and set Bobby into the stroller. Come on, little guy. We're going to go see Mommy. A murder of crows sat on the power lines. As I walked under, I couldn't help feeling as if they were watching me. It made my skin crawl. Not for the first time, I wondered if Felicia had truly been a skinwalker, or a mimic, or if she were a creature inhabiting a body that looked like my wife. The thought unsettled me. I also wondered if she could look like something else, like a crow. The theory seemed preposterous, but then again, so did everything else that had gone on in the past decade. The automatic door swished open, followed by a gust of cool air. The antiseptic smell engulfed me as I pushed the stroller across the thick carpet and into the emergency room. The elderly woman behind the reception desk looked at me and then at Bobby. A big smile crossed her face. A bit of that anger I'd held toward the hospital workers dissipated. She adjusted her glasses for a better look. What can I do for you? We're looking to see which room my wife is in. The woman tapped at the computer for a little while. Behind me were the groans and coughs of people in distress. I tried not to think about them. Tried not to think about the cloud of germs surrounding me. The woman sat up straighter in her chair. Oh, she said. My heart sank. What? She's been moved to critical care. Why? I asked. The woman didn't respond. She picked up the phone and pressed it to her ear. She muttered something into the receiver, but I couldn't make out what she'd said. She grunted a couple of times before hanging up. There aren't any visitors allowed at the moment. What's going on? I asked. That same hopeless feeling weighed on my chest. Well, Dr. White is coming down to speak with you about her condition. As I sat there waiting, I wondered if Dr. White had been the same one who had called the police on me. I tried not to get angry, tried to think about anything else. There were procedures. They had to notify someone of abuse and poisoning. I reminded myself that as the spouse, I was always going to be the first suspect. The rather thin man with blonde hair approached. Judging by the look he gave me, he didn't want to talk to me. The situation is rather serious right now. Her condition is unstable, and she's fallen into a coma. We're doing everything we can, but she's been unresponsive for a couple of hours. I think that's a good place to stop for now. Hello, everybody. I'm back. I'm going to be reading a chapter or so from my book Ruin. Chapter 16. Standing in the hospital parking lot, I didn't know what to do. The world seemed busier than ever, scarier too. I just stood there, watching as people bustled up and down the sidewalk and across the lot. After a while, I decided it would be best to call her family. I got on the phone with her father first. He and I had always gotten along well. Bill, listen, there's no easy way to tell you this. Commotion came over the phone. Robert, I can hardly hear you. I have no reception out here on the course. Bill, it's about Beverly. What? From the background came the unmistakable sound of a club hitting a golf ball. Beverly's gone into a coma. I'm at the hospital now. A long silence filled the line. For a second, I thought I'd have to repeat myself. I didn't think I could. The hospital? He muttered, voice filled with disbelief. What happened? I couldn't bring myself to tell him about the poison accusations yet. I didn't want him to point fingers at me, too. I'm not sure, Bill. Things aren't good now. You should probably come down. When we were off the phone, I found a bench in the shade. Bobby and I sat there for a little while, staring at nothing. Something felt off, like shock. All my emotion seemed stunted, as if they didn't know which order they were supposed to happen. In my head, I said a silent prayer. Out there, somewhere in the great big world, Felicia roamed free. She hadn't been caught, hadn't even been suspected. As far as I could tell, they didn't even know she existed. I tried to think of any way I might be able to help the police, but couldn't think of anything. She didn't have an online presence. She hadn't been around long enough to be in any of our pictures. She didn't leave any fingerprints on the glass, which made me believe she didn't leave any at all. The email notification remained on my phone. I clicked it, having forgotten all about the files Chayton had sent me. When I saw his name, I wasn't sure that I wanted to open it, and I didn't know that I could handle the information. I opened them anyway. A drawing of a creature filled the screen. Its hand pushed through the cave wall, reminiscent of the dream I'd had. The story beneath went on to explain that the Navajo tribe had been under attack from another tribe for a long time. They'd been pillaged and had even lost people to capture. Afraid their shaman summoned a being that blended among them, even worked alongside them. When it came to war, nothing stopped him. The legends then said that he took on the form of a bear and scared off their oppressors. During times of peace, though, he proved to be a nuisance. Manipulative, violent, unpredictable. All of this seemed interesting, but I wasn't sure that it was what I'd been dealing with until the final line. The way they dealt with him was by casting him into a cave and blocking it closed with a massive boulder. I think this might be it, I said, more to myself than Bobby, the blue bubbles of spit. Judging by the smell permeating around him, he didn't care about Felicia or her supernatural origins. Shortly after he soiled himself, he cried. If not for him and his constant need for care, I didn't think I'd be able to handle it. The sheer horror of Beverly being in a coma would render me catatonic. There wasn't a changing station in the men's room. It took several attempts, but I managed to get a new diaper on him while leaning back in the stroller. The other denizens of the men's room gave me looks of sympathy. Nancy called, looking for an update. When I told her what had happened to Beverly, she told me she could come down and help me take care of the baby if I needed it. At first I didn't think I needed it, but then again I did. Felicia's gone, disappeared into the wind. I don't know what else to do. She may have just gotten away with everything. Do you really think it's over? I paused. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to say it aloud because I didn't want to admit it. No, I don't think she's done with me yet. Still, I can't figure out any motivation. Why me? I couldn't say. I thought for a second, hey, I'm going to send you the files that my guy sent me. Read the story and tell me what you think. I forwarded her the link. Yeah, I'll check it out when I get a chance. I'm on the road now. Call me if you need anything, alright? Alright. As I waited outside for Bill, I considered how I'd tell him. The doctors would tell me, what the fuck? The doctors would tell him that he'd been poisoned. Like them, he could believe it was me. I didn't know if he'd believe me about the nanny or not. I wasn't sure if Beverly had mentioned her. He hadn't been to our house since Christmas, so he hadn't seen her in person. The possibility of him believing me seemed far-fetched, and I didn't think I could handle him thinking I'd done it. It would break my heart. When I saw him walking up the path, I considered how haggard he looked compared to our wedding day, even compared to Christmas. That heart attack had taken a lot out of him, including nearly 40 pounds. I ran and wrapped my arms around him. When he found out about the poison, I didn't think he'd ever hug me again. The ongoing theory is that she'd been poisoned. I ripped it off like a band-aid. He cocked his head, confused. What? I nodded. That's what the doctors think. I didn't want to tell him that the police had already questioned me. I didn't think that would help my case. Who would do such a thing? Concern for his already damaged heart came over me. I guess would be our nanny. When I went back home, she'd taken all of her things and left. She even left this little guy by himself. He looked down into the stroller. What has this world come to? If he suspected me at all, he didn't portray it. Chapter 17. The employees at the hospital didn't have the same response to Bill that they did to me. Even though they wouldn't admit it, I could tell they disliked me. Some of them, though I couldn't gather names, thought I'd poisoned my wife. No judge, no jury, straight to execution. Bill the Bull didn't take any shit from them. He didn't ask. He demanded to see his daughter, and they complied, begrudgingly. The two of us were led up to the room in the intensive care unit, where we saw her strapped to all the machines. I hadn't prepared myself, couldn't have prepared myself for it. Tears stood in the corners of my eyes. For comfort, I knelt and touched Bobby's arm. As if on cue, he began to cry. Bill turned to look at me. I expected that same hard stoicism, but that wasn't there. Something else, something softer, appeared. He didn't say anything, only held out his hands to take Bobby, allowing me to be with Beverly. I whispered, "Hey, I heard somewhere that people in a coma could hear when you spoke to them. It's me. Your dad and I are here. So is the baby." A tinge of guilt came bubbling up. If I'd told her about the nanny sooner, I might have spared her. She might not be in a coma. The feeling weighed heavily on me, and I couldn't contain the tears that trickled out. I didn't want to speak of that with her father behind me. "Don't worry about us. We have everything under control here. We need you to get better. Focus on that. Focus on nothing coming back to us. I love you. I don't want to go the rest of my life without you. Be strong." I turned and nodded at Bill. He handed me the baby. "Hey, honey," he said. "I wish I'd told you more how much I love you." He touched her hand. In the hall, a nurse bustled. We'd forgotten to close the door. I turned and walked across the room to do so when my phone pinged with an incoming text. There have been some strange reports over the scanner about a woman stealing things in Old Pine. I don't know for sure, but I think it could be our girl. Nancy's use of "our girl" turned my stomach. I didn't know what to say. "I'm going to take a look." Relief and concern came over me simultaneously. "Be careful," I responded. Seeing Beverly strapped to all those machines broke my heart. I didn't know what to do. Didn't know how to help. Likely there wasn't anything I could do. The doctors had everything under control. Even watching her father grasping her hand and praying over her, I couldn't watch for long. The tears were there, trickling from time to time. I felt so useless. In our time together, when there'd been a problem, I'd been able to fix it. Now, I couldn't. The look on Bill's face nearly killed me. In all the years I'd known him, I'd never seen him break down. But there, standing at her bedside, he held back something fierce. When I put my hand on his shoulder, he jumped. "Sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to scare you." He said nothing. A couple of nurses walked by, talking. One of them laughed. The thought hit me so strangely that I laughed too. Beyond the doors, people were living their lives, most of them oblivious to what was going on. Inside, life never felt so thin, tottering back and forth on the verge of darkness. When the doctors came in and spoke to us, he did so without good news. Aside from saying that she could pull out, he didn't have much. The test results had returned with a unique kind of poison, something I couldn't pronounce. I could have sworn he'd said it was something in his eye, something that pointed a finger at me. I watched Bill's face carefully, hoping he hadn't picked up on that. Bill and I walked out of the hospital together. We got a call shortly after, which he answered with a snap. "It's your daughter, too. You should be here." I hadn't considered it might be Beverly's mom. When he finished, he shook his head at me. I could see the disappointment on his face. He'd tied himself to a lifetime full of pain. Even though they weren't together anymore, he still had to deal with her for the sake of their daughter. The idea of sitting around with Bill waiting for Beverly's mother didn't appeal to me. I didn't think I could handle watching her cry, too. "I've got some things to do," I said. He nodded, contemplated my statement briefly, and then said, "If you need anything, give me a call. I'll keep you updated." My father, David, called me from Florida. He wished he could come up to be with us in our hard times, but he couldn't break away. Talking to him always hurt, because it felt like he'd never been the same, never moved on after my mother died. Rhea called, too. Our conversation was sweet and to the point. She said she was going to get a flight this weekend. Get some water. Chapter 18. On my way home, guilt plagued me. Unlike her parents, I couldn't sit around the hospital all day. I had a baby, a job, and worst of all, a nanny in the wild pretending to be my wife. During my time at the hospital, I'd lost a lot of daylight. By the time we got home, the sun had descended in the west, leaving behind a cloudless sky. The state-of-the-art security system brought little comfort because we'd given Felicia the passcode when she moved in. With a new diaper and a mouthful of formula, Bobby stared up at the ceiling. I dialed our favorite pizza spot, even though my appetite had faded. If I didn't eat something, I knew I'd feel awful in a couple of hours. I'd only just hung up the phone when it erupted my hand with a call from Nancy. "Hey," I said, walking toward the birdcage. I tossed the blanket over the top. George seemed annoyed. If he hadn't grown accustomed to it for 20 years, I didn't think he was going to. Not covering him guaranteed a night of endless squawking. I had made that mistake once, when Bev had stayed overnight on a business trip. Not much luck. I think it's her roaming around Pine Springs, stealing resources, but I couldn't track her down. From what I can tell, she doesn't have a pattern. She's likely staying somewhere in the area, hiding. "You should be safe for now. I'd still suggest locking your door, though." "Thanks," I said, as I poured a scoop of dried food into Gilligan's non-slip bowl. She was starving, her mouth open, reaching in for a bite before I had even finished pouring. Poor girl. "As far as the documents you sent me, you really think that's what we're dealing with?" She paused. I knew disbelief when I heard it. I couldn't explain it to her because I didn't fully understand it myself. "I hope not, but maybe. You saw for yourself with the fingerprints. Whatever we're dealing with isn't normal. I have a feeling Beverly wasn't her first form." I didn't have the time to explain all the other small, miscellaneous things that led to my conclusion. More silence. More silence filled the phone line. "You do realize how this sounds, right?" "Oh, believe me. I understand what I sound like. I understand I sound insane. I get it. It's bad enough that the police already questioned me about poisoning her, and the hospital staff gave me the nastiest looks when I walked through there." Nancy sighed. "All right. I don't blame you for having doubts. I have plenty of my own. What I can tell you for sure is that she looks identical to Beverly. She seemed to have no background, and in the entire fight, she's been ahead of me every step. It's unsettling, and maybe supernatural." Another silence followed. For a second, I thought she'd hung up on me. "I just want you to understand that I've been a private investigator for a long time, and in my experience, it's never a ghost making noises in the basement. It's usually an old boiler or rusty pipes." I completely understood where she came from. "It's better that you don't believe," I said. "Maybe then you'll be able to figure it out and explain it to me. I'd be happy for you to prove me wrong." This made her chuckle. "All right, consider me your resident skeptic. We should get together. You, Chayton, and I will see if we can rationalize any of this. Maybe by the end of the week. She agreed. Take care of yourself, Robert, and kiss the baby for me. Done and done. Good night, Nancy. We'll talk soon. The knock on the door startled me and set Bobby off crying. In the time that I'd been on the phone with Nancy, I'd completely forgotten about ordering the pizza. It wasn't until I was 10 feet from the door that a thought crossed my mind. What if it wasn't the pizza man? Another paranoid thought followed. What if she made herself look like the pizza man? These thoughts plagued me as I approached the window and looked through the shades. A pimply-faced kid stood on the doorstep. A hunk of shit car sat by the curb. When I opened the door, the kid gave me a total. I couldn't help staring. As if he were a suspect in a crime show, I considered interrogating him. I didn't want him to stick around any longer than needed. I handed him the money and took the pizza. The conversation had likely been more uncomfortable for him than me. I'm sure he suspected something was off, but didn't press. He wanted to get away from me as much as I wanted him to get away. The crying baby in the background likely added to the unsettling ambiance. Before I closed the door, I noticed a car parked across the street. At closer inspection, I identified the lady cop sitting in the driver's seat. Her uniform likely hung on a hook somewhere. We made brief, knowing eye contact before I closed the door. The warm, cheesy scent of pizza wafted in the air as I walked toward the couch. The delivery boy must have thought I was on drugs. I wondered how long the lady cop had been posted by my door. Bobby and I watched TV for a while, yawning. I tried not to think about the cop stationed out front, although I did feel a little safer with her there. If Felicia decided to come back, then the police would see her and believe me. I reminded myself that I had to change the pin on the alarm, and probably the locks too. Per usual, there wasn't much on TV, and I found it impossible to pay attention. My mind was too busy. I was too tired. My eyes had grown heavy, and the thought had slowed me to a crawl. In my exhausted haze, I noticed something. The smell that had permeated the house for the past few weeks had disappeared. Before long, Bobby drifted off to sleep. My back strained as I carried him to his crib. Thankfully, he didn't wake as I laid him to rest. Once down, I walked back to the kitchen where I found myself a couple of beers hanging out in the back of the fridge. I didn't want to get carried away with a baby in the house. The first went down quickly, helping ease some of the stress I'd accumulated. The second didn't go down as fast, but fast enough. When the alcohol lingered in my system, a little bit of relief came over me. A million thoughts still rested on my shoulder, but I silenced them long enough to fall asleep on the couch. In a nightmare as dark as sin itself, I found myself in an uncontrollable rage. Everything I could touch broke. My fists thrashed and blasted until my knuckles were wrought with blood and mangled flesh. I screamed into the abyss. Voices returned, a strange echo bouncing off the nothingness of eternity. They weren't speaking in English, but certainly a language lost to time. There, in the center of nothing, stood a pyre that hadn't been there before. Felicia stood with her hands tied to a post. The chanting from that previous dream filled my head as the embers lit. Her screams carried, forcing me back into the waking world. Chapter 19. The sun hadn't risen by the time I'd gotten out of bed. The odds of falling back asleep weren't in my favor, so I didn't bother. Placing my foot on the cold floor, a noise struck me as odd. My first thought wasn't anything inside the house, but rather a creature in the yard. It wasn't until I heard it the second time that I realized it had come from inside. My thoughts turned to the worst, as they often do when you're alone. It sounded a bit like a wounded animal. Gilligan? I rushed to my feet. No, not Gilligan. She was standing at my closed bedroom door. I went into the hall to trace the sound to its source. It didn't take long for me to realize that it wasn't an animal that had gotten inside, but my son, having a nightmare of his own. He whimpered and kicked. Reaching into the crib, I whispered, Hey, it's all right. He woke for a second before he protested the anguish with a bursting cry. Dry Pampers and some light rocking brought him back to a state of content. I didn't know if nightmares were contagious, or even what babies dreamt about, but I didn't like whatever had happened to us. A little bit of milking will be right as rain. Beverly's absence in the house bothered me. Checking my phone, I hoped that I'd find a missed call from the hospital or her parents. Guilt came over me too, because other husbands may have stayed the night in the hospital. If not for the baby, I might have done that. Formula wasn't any substitute for the real thing, but she hadn't produced much. We tried everything, and even considered buying the real thing, but eventually settled on the manufactured stuff. Bobby didn't take to it as well as we'd hoped either. He'd resisted quite a bit in the beginning. "We're going back to the hospital when they allow visitors," I said, giving him the bottle. "Maybe we'll have some good news." Holding the bottle to his mouth, I couldn't help thinking about how much he looked like his mother, which made me miss her even more. As we'd said, the only thing he got from me was his name. It didn't take long before the little man had settled. Once he returned to his crib with a full belly, he drifted off again, nightmare forgotten. In a strange state of broken sleep, I lay in front of the TV. I caught bits and pieces of shows and commercials between bouts of restless sleep. During the night, I'd forgotten to charge my phone, and the battery had gotten low. I plugged it in while I made breakfast. Coffee bubbled in the pot, and grilled cheese burned on the skillet. Cooking had never been my best accomplishment. I barely knew enough to get by. Streaks of pink broke through the windows as the sun came up. I walked to the front of the house, stole a glance outside, and didn't see her car there. Either she'd given up for the night or been called away. Either way, I didn't miss her. Grilled cheese tasted as bad as it looked, and the woman on the news squawked louder than George about an unprecedented amount of train derailments. They cited various changes in safety policies and all the possibilities that could have led to these horrendous accidents. "Isn't that something?" I asked the baby. Not that long ago, I'd watched the story unfold about the ruins. I thought that it would have gotten more attention, possibly national headlines, but it faded from the cycle rather quickly. Thoughts of the ruins led me to thoughts of Felicia, which reminded me of the dream. The pyre, the fire, the screams, they all came back to me. I wondered if this had been a message from the great beyond, some unseeable force telling me how to stop her. I liked the idea, loved it really. There was something almost poetic about burning her at the stake. The second cup of coffee went down quicker than the first. I searched through my phone for a little while, checking through social media and different news sites. There weren't too many stories floating around that could have been attached to her. Getting Bobby ready proved to be a pain in the neck. He didn't want to cooperate. "Don't you want to see Mommy?" I asked. The thought of seeing her in her present condition broke my heart, and before we closed the door, I found myself crying again. Sitting in an unmarked car across the street was the same woman I'd seen the night before. She had a newspaper blocking her face, unsuccessfully. The thought of blowing her cover enticed me. I thought it would be hilarious, but decided against it. As I headed for the car, I reminded myself that she was there to serve and protect, not stalk and blame. Even though I'd had nothing to hide from her, I didn't like her watching me, didn't like the level of paranoia it brought with it. I stopped for a second, looking up and down the street. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing looked suspicious. After strapping Bobby into his car seat, we got on the road. As I drove by, I couldn't help staring into her car. She continued hiding her face from me. Again, I considered rolling down the window and saying something, but decided better. As I drove down the block, I looked at my rear view, expecting her to follow. When she didn't, I was surprised. A million thoughts ran through my head on the long drive to the hospital. I didn't know what I'd do if Beverly passed. Hadn't allowed myself that thought. Now it hit me like a bulldozer. I had to force the possibility that the love of my life might not pull through. It scared me. I tried not to cry as I went through traffic. As a distraction, I turned up the radio. In between songs and weather updates, the DJ spoke about a crime spree happening in Navajo Nation. There were a lot of burglaries, and even a couple of murders. "That's her," I muttered to myself. Everything seemed harder than before. All the stress built up, surrounding me like a wall that I couldn't climb or escape. I felt claustrophobic. Sitting at a red light, everything became blurry, and my heart raced. I struggled to catch my breath. For a second, I thought I was having a heart attack. Panic escalated, spiking my adrenaline. It wasn't until someone behind me honked that I came back to reality and pulled the car off the road. With my hand on my chest, I talked myself off the ledge. I guess I'd had a panic attack. Even though I planned on going to the hospital, I couldn't bring myself to check in. I didn't want anything to happen to Bobby. I didn't want the hospital staff, who already thought I was guilty, to think that I was incapable of raising my son. They could get child protective services involved. They'd already phoned the police. According to the doctor, there hadn't been much progress. She still hadn't come out of the coma. Her brain activity hadn't changed, which proved to be a good thing because she was still active inside her head. Staring at her body, I wished I could communicate with her, send a message through the darkness just to tell her that I loved her. We loved her. I sat by her bedside, unsure of what to do. I held her hand and waited, hoping she'd open her eyes, as if the whole thing had been a long nap. I caressed her hair and thought about all the good times we'd had, the life we'd had, and our future after all the mess was behind us. Hoisting Bobby up, I allowed him to see his mother, and I spoke to her. We spoke about some of the things we'd been up to, trying to make them sound more interesting than they were. After 2 hours of a visit, the baby became restless and began to cry. I kissed the top of her head. I wish I could stay longer, my love. I wish I could climb into that bed with you, but I can't. I'll see you when you get up, okay? Again, I kissed her head and brushed her hair off her face. When I turned around, a nurse stood in the doorway. Hello. My name is Wendy. I've been taking care of Beverly overnight. I thought I'd drop by to see you. I just wanted you to know that she's in good hands. This struck me as odd. Thanks, I said, trying to drum up sincerity through concern. She paused a little too long, and then a smile curved half of her face. Rather than letting me out, she closed the door behind her. Can I ask you a question? Pushing the stroller behind me, I said, Sure. She brushed her dyed blonde hair off her shoulder. Do you believe in the supernatural, Robert? Evil spirits, premonitions? Until recently, I hadn't. My whole life had been based on facts. I stammered for a second. Yeah, I guess. Last night, well, technically this morning, she spoke to me. Part of me wanted to roll my eyes. I didn't want to hear her mystic bullshit. That part of me stopped when I noticed the hypocrisy. I had a series of bizarre dreams that could have been considered supernatural. She told me that you and your son were both named Robert, that I'd find you here. She also told me to warn you about Felicia, that she plans to kill you, like she tried to kill her. Wendy pointed at Beverly's sleeping body. And like she killed... She paused, pressed her fingers to her temple. Clayton? Clinton? My eyes grew wide. Chayton? Chayton, she said. Yeah, that's right. My legs nearly gave out. I think that's a good place to stop. Oh, you guys down here chit-chatting about me?
Yep.
Anything, what did I miss? Anything interesting?
You're talented. Very, very talented.
Oh, you guys. That was a little reading from my book, Ruin. It's part of the Prepping Down the Rabbit Hole series. I'm in it. Our friend Shae Smith is in it. Our friend, I almost said Clint Baker. Not Clint Baker, Mike Minicky. Our friend Kristen Moran. They're all in it. Thanks for sharing. That's alright. Figured I'd just get a few chapters in. And I'll see you guys. I got a host for Mike's show tomorrow. Yeah. Night Riders, Myths, and Legends. I'm going to go on there and I'm going to tell a couple of stories. I've got one in particular that happened to me when I was a teenager, a supernatural story about some ghosts. I'll be telling that, and we'll be talking about my books probably toward the end of the show. Alright, everybody. Tune in tomorrow. I'm going to read some more from my book, Ruin, by Stephanie James Publishing. It's part of the Prepping Down the Rabbit Hole series. Chapter 20. The phone continuously rang. My foot tapped on the linoleum as I waited for a man I didn't know to answer. When he didn't on the third time, I gave up. Is she talking to you now? I asked Wendy. She shook her head. Only once, last night. Holding my head in my hands, I considered what might have happened. I wondered if she'd had some sort of dream or something. Has anything like this happened before? Again, she shook her head. You've never had someone to talk to you in that way before? Any psychic phenomena you want to tell me about? No. Before last night, I wasn't even a believer. I always chalked it up to wishful thinking. People who wanted to hear from the... She'd been about to say dead, but before she stopped herself. Well, people who wanted to reach others. She took a seat in the visitor's chair, as if she didn't have anything better to do. No, I had a grandma who was into all that psychic stuff, but not me. I always thought she was batty. She swirled a finger in a circle around her head. I didn't have the time to research clairvoyance and whether it was hereditary or not. Okay, that's her message in its entirety. You're not holding on anything back or forgetting anything? She shook her head. No, but it was such a strange thing. I was walking down the hall when her voice came into my head, loud and clear, unlike my own thoughts, which are softer. It didn't even sound like me. It took me about 20 minutes to figure out who on this floor had been talking to me, let alone how. Her sitting in the visitor's chair with her legs crossed as if she were a member of the team bothered me, but I didn't have a choice but to talk to her. All right, I nodded a couple of times, trying to figure out how I talked to her about everything going on. So, do you want to tell me what's going on here, or do you want me to leave? Honestly, I'm kind of hoping you'll tell me. I don't want you to get caught up in any of this. Truly, what we're dealing with is dangerous. Wendy didn't seem concerned. The look on her face told me that she'd seen enough, likely been through through plenty of danger. I couldn't imagine what she'd gone through just working at the hospital. Dangerous. Yeah, I get that. I guess that I'm meant to be a part of this. I'd guess that I'm meant to be a part of this. If she's reaching out to me through telepathy or whatever, I'd say that I deserve to know what's going on. My mind returned to Chayton. If what she'd said were true, he died because of us. We've already lost someone because of this. If I were you, I'd walk out that door and never look back. She scoffed. That's just it. You're not me. I walked across the room and closed the door. All right. So, here's what we know. There's a cave in Old Pine Valley. Something was trapped inside. Something that some natives summoned to protect them from another tribe long, long ago. They couldn't contain it or stop it, so they trapped it. She nodded. Something like what? We believe that it was a skinwalker, or something like it. Something that can look like someone or something else. She took the shape of my wife, interviewed for a nanny position, and lived with us for a while. A woman who looked like your wife lived with you working as a nanny. I didn't like her tone. Yes, my wife hired her. She looked like she was about to say something before closing her mouth and nodding. Gripping the bridge of my nose, I said, We've since lost track of her. We? You and this Chayton fellow? There's one more, a private eye named Nancy. Wendy stared at Beverly lying in the hospital bed. She stared for a long time. She looked deep in thought. So, tell me more about your conversation with Beverly. She shook her head, pursing her lips. There isn't much to tell, honestly. The first time I heard her, I was walking down the hall. She pointed to the door. Didn't even realize the voice had come from inside my head at first. Can you talk back? Does she respond to you? She shook her head. No, the conversation is pretty one-sided. If she can hear me, she doesn't respond. She only tells me what she wants me to hear and hasn't since that first night. Interesting. It's good to know that I'm not losing it, she said. For a little while there, I thought I'd end up in the psych ward. In my experience, people who have voices in their heads don't go over very well here. So, where do we go from here? Like I said, I don't think you want to be a part of this. I crossed the room and opened the door again. If you decide that you're a part of this, well, I can take your number in case she says anything else. Chapter 21. On our way home, I couldn't stop thinking about Wendy. Beverly had reached out from her coma to warn us. I couldn't wrap my head around the strange place I'd found myself. Prior to Felicia and Chayton, I didn't believe in ghosts, let alone psychic phenomena. Bobby and I sat in front of the television. The urge to call Chayton again crossed my mind, but I didn't know what I'd do if a loved one answered. I didn't know how I'd explain our connection, let alone the fact that I might be responsible for his death. I couldn't stomach the idea and pushed my frozen dinner away. Everything felt hopeless, like I'd never get out from under the rock I'd found myself under. I missed Bev. Her absence felt left an unfillable void in my life. It was so much worse than just having her around. It was so much worse than just having her around. Without her, everything felt wrong. We weren't we were meant to embark on this journey together, and without her, the trains didn't run on time. The water didn't trickle in the right direction, and all of the stars seemed as if they'd fall from the sky. I miss her, little man, I whispered, more to myself than him. The news played a few boring stories. They reported on more derailment information. One of the major train companies refused to settle and planned to take it to trial. More from boredom than curiosity, I browsed the internet for more information on whatever we were dealing with. I started with articles and stories that Chayton had sent. I worked my way out. Before long, I found myself listening to all sorts of legends on YouTube. There were a handful of people who claimed that their ancestors had been there during the ceremony that summoned this monster. It didn't take long before I went deep down a rabbit hole. A lot of the retellings considered this thing to be insatiable, claiming it had a thirst for blood. That didn't seem to be the case in my experience. She hadn't, as far as I could tell, killed anyone. That was enough to shed a little doubt over me. I wondered if it was possible that she'd gotten older and hadn't been as bloodthirsty. I also wondered if they were just stories that had been exaggerated over time. After watching a bunch of clips, I didn't know what to think. I wasn't certain we were talking about the same thing. She'd been manipulative, but she didn't seem nearly as violent as the apparition they were talking about. She hadn't even raised a voice to Beverly or me. There hadn't been any missing people from our neighborhood or random acts of violence. I considered sending my findings to Nancy, but thought better of it. It was the middle of the night, and I was certain she didn't want to hear a bunch of YouTube conspiracies. She, like me, had based her entire career around facts. We didn't buy into nonsense. Unable to understand Felicia's motive, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling for a long time, trying to determine why she'd chosen us. As far as I could tell, our ancestors weren't the ones who locked her away. They hadn't been the ones to summon her either. The whole thing seemed completely random to me. Then I wondered if it had been the victim of if we had been the victim of circumstance. Perhaps she'd been wandering, looking for a place to hide, then she'd come across Beverly in a supermarket or something. That seemed like the best explanation. A loud crash startled me from deep thought. I shot to my feet, ran down the stairs. By the time I reached the bottom step, I knew we were in big trouble. Smoke filled the room. Fuck! I shouted as the flames rose. The living room window had a giant hole in it where something had crashed through. Judging by the broken glass and flames eating the carpet, I guessed it to be a Molotov cocktail. Stomping at the flames did nothing because they were fueled by an accelerant. Thankfully, we kept a fire extinguisher beneath the sink. Returning to the living room and spraying the foam worked. That's when the door flew open. I expected Felicia to be standing there, prepared to take her revenge. Instead, the same female cop who'd been watching me stood in the doorway, panting. She ripped down the curtain, tossed it on the fire, and began stomping her feet. I sprayed the part that the curtain hadn't covered. Together, we brought the fire under control. She stared at me for a long time. A woman threw the window. I chased her down the street, but she got away. I nodded. That would be Felicia. I couldn't think of anyone else who would do this. She scratched the top of her head as if I'd said something insane. You mean that nanny story is true? We all thought... Unfortunately, it's true. Just like that, she told me she thought I'd been the one to poison Beverly. They were following me, not for my well-being, but because they thought they could catch me. I considered telling her the truth, but she wouldn't believe me. I then considered telling her a more digestible version of the truth, something she could potentially believe. I figured if I left out some details, she might believe me. The carpet and drapes were destroyed, but thankfully the fire was out. Coffee? I asked, because I didn't know what else to do. Cindy didn't drink coffee. I couldn't blame her. After all, she did believe me that I poisoned. After all, she did believe that I'd poisoned my wife. I drank it out of the same pot without a qualm. I told her what I could tell her. Judging by the look on her face, she didn't believe most of it. So what you're telling me is that this nanny, who suspiciously looks like your wife, poisoned her. She nodded. I could tell she wasn't buying it, and again I couldn't blame her. It sounds insane. I understand. If it helps, I think the reason my wife hired her was because they look alike. I think she was convinced they were related somehow. Admittedly, I found it more creepy than interesting. After I finished my cup, I reached across the table and took hers. Rather than taking it to the sink and dumping it, I drank that one too. I didn't want it to go to waste. Also, part of me wanted to convince her that I hadn't and wouldn't poison anyone. I had a strong feeling that she'd been analyzing me from the start. I have no interest in poisoning my wife. I love her. I know everyone who kills their wives probably says that, but this time it's true. I don't want to raise the baby on my own. I don't want to go the rest of my life without her. There I paused. A tear stood in my duct, and even though it could have won me some favor, I didn't want to cry in front of her. She inhaled deeply and rested back in the chair. Let's say I believe you. What's the motive? Did you have an affair with her? Did she want your wife out of the picture so you two could be together? The picture of the two of us in bed came to mind. I hadn't thought of them in a long time, and I hoped that she hadn't gotten her hands on them. I've never done anything with her. She does look a lot like your wife. Your words, she pressed. That's true, but she isn't my wife. Chapter 22. It wasn't difficult to find Chayton's obituary. He looked handsome in a picture I guessed was 10 years old. It looked as if it had been taken from a wedding or something. Unknown causes. My eyes flicked over the words numerous times. I knew the causes. Had no doubt that she'd killed him the same way that she'd almost killed Beverly. I texted Nancy. She's back. It didn't take long before she responded. I'll come into town when I can. Kind of tied up at the moment. She killed Chayton. I sent her the obituary. Jesus. That's all she said. My thoughts returned to the night before and the cop who sat across the table from me. She looked me over repeatedly, watching for any tell, like a poker player. I didn't know what she'd gotten out of the conversation, but it couldn't have been much. Likely she didn't believe me. Then I thought about this other strange piece of the puzzle, Wendy. My wife had reached out to a woman in the hospital to send me a message. Thankfully, I listened because the house could have been burned down if I hadn't. Where does this go from here, Bobby? He cooed, took a strawberry, and dropped it on the floor. My thoughts exactly, I said. I'm going back to the hospital to see Mom. I think you might visit with Grandpa and Grandma, if they'll take you, that is. On the road, I gave them a call. Billy the Bull picked up on the second ring. With a gruff voice, he asked, Robert, what's going on? I'm on the way to the hospital now. I was wondering if you guys would take the baby for the weekend. He didn't hesitate. We'd be glad to. There was something in his voice, something I couldn't decipher. But if I were a betting man, I'd say that he was reminiscent of his daughter. Perhaps Bobby looked like his mother, or acted like her, and the memories were painful. The thought of Bobby being in the care of Billy the Bull and his second wife, Marina, brought me a bit of comfort. They've always been good grandparents. We're going to get through this, I said. He cleared his throat. Yeah. We both knew the conversation wouldn't go any further. If we were to continue, we'd likely end up crying, and neither of us wanted that. On the way to the hospital, I planned on dropping him off at their house, a place I'd never grown comfortable with. There was something about it that bothered me. Not that it seemed eerie or anything, only that it didn't feel like a home. When I stepped inside, I never felt at home. It had a sterile smell, like a hospital, and they kept it incredibly clean. Although I didn't know for sure, I figured they had a maid. The bedroom in which my wife had grown up remained intact. A lot of her things from her teenage years were there, and on a couple of occasions we'd stayed in her twin bed. before Bobby was born. Hello, Bill greeted me at the door. He took the diaper bag and the stroller. Big plans for the weekend? I shook my head. The last thing I wanted to tell him was that I planned on putting an end to the curse that had been taunting us for weeks. I didn't want him to think of me as crazy. Didn't want to end up in a padded room. I just need a little break is all. I love him to death, but he can be a handful. This made the old man chuckle. Grandkids are the best. Should have had 'em first. This made me laugh. As I thanked him, I wondered if he would interrupt his time on the golf course. Like many lawyers, I got invited frequently, but couldn't be bothered unless I had a client merely demanding it. Marina appeared over his shoulder, smiling from ear to ear. I turned around and headed for the car. Take care of yourself, he called after me. It wasn't until I stepped off the porch and looked back that I had a feeling come over me. Well, more of a thought that led to a feeling. I'd never felt more helpless. It occurred to me that I might not be able to stop the woman who'd taken Beverly from me. Even worse, she could stop me. As I approached the car, I considered that it might be the last time I saw my son. I should have held him longer, kissed him. I should have loved him better. Tears fell as I got in the car and headed for the hospital. We'd already had one casualty in this war, and I didn't like it. He didn't deserve to die because of my bullshit. A song played on the radio, something soft and slow. Part of me yearned to change the station, to find something that might not make me cry more. I didn't. I left it there, allowing myself to relish the pain because I thought it might be helpful, or in some masochistic way, I felt that I deserved it. Chapter 23. The doctors hadn't made any major breakthroughs. The police hadn't been around looking for me either, which made me feel a little relieved. Standing in the doorway, I couldn't walk in for a second. I didn't want her to know what I planned to do, didn't want her to sense something in my voice or pick it up from the other worldly place. I straightened myself up, wiped the tears away, and walked in as together as I could. As I sat by her bed, I remembered something from a church group nearly 30 years earlier. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Taking her hand, I whispered to her about our baby spending the weekend with her parents, and that she had nothing to worry about. As I said this, I looked over my shoulder, deeply concerned that Wendy would be standing behind me. She wasn't. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Bev. I pray that you come out of this. We have a long journey ahead of us, many more miles. Come on, babe. I need you. When she didn't respond, I gave her hand another squeeze. I'd hoped that she would stir, reach through the fog of her coma to tell me something, send me another message. Her silence hurt. She didn't squeeze back. I also wished that Wendy were there with good news. A million things ran through my mind as I held her hand, none of which were good. I couldn't imagine a world without her. The thought terrified me. I also thought about the other possibilities. Beverly making out of a coma, but not fully recovering. Every day she remained comatose, she lost muscle mass to atrophy. The risks plagued me. I didn't want to leave my son an orphan either, but the police couldn't handle such a case. They were incapable of seeing beyond the ordinary into the realm of possibilities. Like myself, most of them operated on facts and discarded anything that wasn't backed by solid evidence. I called Nancy. My foot tapped wildly on the floor as it rang. We're going to have to do this thing. We're going to have to do this weekend. She scoffed. I haven't had a man speak to me like that in a long time. I'm in. I laughed. Couldn't help it. She tried to burn down my house last night. Tossed a Molotov cocktail through my front window. I don't know what else she has planned for me, but it can't be good. All right. As far as I can tell, we have two options. We can either lock her back in the cave and run the risk that she gets out again in 100 years, or we can burn her. How do you know that'll work? I wasn't sure I wanted to tell her that I'd had all these bizarre dreams. Then again, I didn't make a habit of lying to her. I've been dreaming about this a lot lately. Where are you now? I'm at the hospital with Beverly. My in-laws have the baby. I'm not too far from your house. What do you say we have the rest of this rendezvous in person? Don't tell my wife, I snickered. Oh, that's fresh. I like that. At nearly 20 years my senior and a lifelong bachelorette who likely played for the other team, I didn't take an ounce of our flirtation seriously. Neither did she. Hanging up, I couldn't help the half smile that covered my face. After that, I turned and saw Beverly lying there and felt immense guilt. Someone cleared their throat behind me, and I whipped around, seeing an officer standing in the doorway. Cindy. Depending on how long she'd been standing there, she could have heard me plot a murder. I hesitated, searching for something to say. Sweat creased my brow. The words stammered. She lifted her hand up to stop me and walked inside. No progress, huh? I shook my head. Have you heard anything from your nanny? She paused, on the word nanny, which unsettled me a bit. Again, I shook my head. Even after our coffee date, I didn't think she believed my nanny story. I couldn't blame her either. It seemed like the most ridiculous thing in the world, even just the part she knew. There was no chance she believed the story in its entirety. She stepped closer to Beverly. For whatever reason, I didn't like her being that close. I realized in that moment that I didn't trust her, cop or not. Something about the way she spoke, something about the way she moved. I didn't like her. I couldn't like her. I also didn't like how quickly she decided my guilt, as if I didn't have any presumption of innocence. Were you talking to your girlfriend? She asked, not looking back at me. That's absurd. I paused, trying to keep my composure. That's a friend of mine if you need to know. An older friend? I cleared my throat, hoping to sound more confident. A much older friend? She turned to look back at me. She's pretty, you know. There wasn't anything left to say. It's too bad. Tragic. Part of me wished I had poisoned her coffee because then she'd be off my back. Then I wouldn't have to explain myself to her or watch over my shoulder. She walked past me toward the door. Say, you wouldn't happen to remember anything else about the nanny, would you? Anything that might have come to you since we last saw each other? I shook my head. I wanted to ask her why she didn't believe me when she chased her off that night. Wendy walked into the room. There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. The cop turned to look at me with a smug, knowing look. I'll see you soon, she said through gritted teeth. Chapter 24. In only a matter of minutes, my mood, which already hadn't been good, sunk. Wendy's presence didn't bring any relief or comfort. I didn't want her there. Didn't care for her company, and didn't trust her either. I gripped the bridge of my nose, trying to keep calm. Did she tell you something else? Rather than looking at her, I stared out the window at the tall building outside. No. Do you have something for me? A message or something? She paused. Yes. Well, sort of. Turning to face her, I swallowed hard against my dry throat. What is it? There's another voice. At this, I couldn't help but let out a groan. Are you sure you're not having some sort of mental break? Are you certain that my wife spoke to you, not some random voice inside your head? Her face hardened. I'm not crazy. I fought back the urge to tell her what I thought. What did the other voice say? That's just it. Without context, it didn't make any sense. It didn't seem like they were talking to me exactly. It seemed more like I was hearing their thoughts. I searched the hospital multiple times. I don't think it came from here. What makes you say that? They were talking about Chayton. The only people who know who he is were... Sorry, people who knew him are in this room. It wasn't her, she pointed to my wife. I know what she sounds like. I nodded. It wasn't you. I nodded again. It wasn't me. I shrugged. That doesn't tell me anything. Someone out there is thinking about Chayton, and you picked up on their thoughts. I wanted to tell her to stop wasting my time, but didn't. So you tuned into their frequency. I gripped my chin and looked back at the window for a second. That's exactly it. I tuned into her frequency. I knew what she was talking about. I knew what she was thinking. I even heard her contemplating Chayton's connections to her tribe and the elders. I didn't know what to say about that. I think she's going to disguise herself as him, as Chayton, to get closer to them. I think she plans on getting revenge. Part of me wanted to be angry, but I found pity instead. After a pause, she said, "She must be nearby." This comment made me think about an antenna. I didn't know how accurate that was, but it seemed possible that she could pick up on these thoughts by proximity. She, the mysterious, all-powerful she. By refraining from saying her name, we felt as if we were withholding some of her power. I wasn't to the point where I was afraid to say it because I understood that she wasn't Felicia. She'd never been a woman named Felicia. She wore the skin of a woman who looked like my wife, but she had no family, no parents, and no soul. I nodded. Whether I liked it or not, she had something to do with the puzzle. A million thoughts raced through my head, but I couldn't keep a plan together. Without Chayton, what little bit of an advantage I had disappeared. She had always been a few steps ahead, right from the start. Throwing my hands up, I said, "I don't know what to do. I don't have a plan. Not really." For the first time, I got a good look at Wendy. Her blonde hair looked dirty and unkempt. Her dark eyes had rings around them, as if sleep were a stranger. Her skin didn't have the same youthful look of a woman her age, but rather pale and pallid color. "We're going after Burner," she muttered. "I think it's the only way." Chapter 25. Sitting in my living room, staring into Wendy's eyes, I wondered how we'd gotten here. On the other side sat Nancy. She rubbed her hands together with the same sandpapery scratch. Nancy looked at me. "I see what she did to the rug." A black spot covered my rug where she'd thrown the cocktail. I still hadn't done anything to block the hole it created in my window. I groaned. "Yeah, she did a little redecorating for me." Something about Wendy's eyes had changed. She looked even less alive, which didn't seem possible. That's when I concluded what I'd seen in the first place. Wendy wasn't nursing. Wendy was nursing an addiction. Sitting there, barely listening, she was loaded. Pills were my best guess, and I imagined there were nursing facilities in the rear view with medication unaccounted for. I had no intention of confronting her about it if it didn't affect me. If she is disguised as Chayton, I don't know how we'd get her without everyone on the reservation trying to kill us. "Is he really important there?" Wendy asked. "To what degree, I'm not sure, but yes, he's well connected to the elders, from what I've gathered." We sat there discussing all the possibilities. There were too many things that could go wrong, too many risks. I had to do something. I couldn't let her continue ruining my life. She'd already taken enough from me. Wendy stood, stretched her back. "Why did she choose you anyway?" I shrugged. "That's a great question. One that I've been wondering myself. If I had to guess, I'd say that she wanted my life. Well, my wife's life. Perhaps she thought she'd be able to hide in plain sight. After poisoning Beverly, she could just slip into her shoes." It made as much sense as anything else. Nancy said, "She could have started this because you were suspicious of her. You foiled her plan before it even started." I nodded. "We should probably get going." Nancy and I got into the SUV. Wendy followed in her beat-up sedan. It didn't take long before we were on the road, headed for the reservation. I didn't know anyone there and wasn't sure that they'd welcome us. The idea of telling the story seemed horrible to me. I couldn't imagine they'd believe me, nor many people would, and I couldn't blame them for it. I knew how crazy it sounded and thought about it a lot myself. I wondered if I was the one losing it and that she hadn't been a normal woman. Trees brushed past as we drove. An unfamiliar country song played on the radio. I stared in the side mirror, watching as my house drifted out of sight. Part of me wondered if I'd ever see it again. Lying back in the leather seat, I closed my eyes. I tried to channel all my energy, all my thoughts into meditation, hoping that I might pick up on the same frequencies that Wendy had. I wanted to hear her voice again, hear it for myself. Using as much focus as I could, I tried to reach out to help her, hoping she could hear me. No response. I even tried reaching out to Wendy to see if she could pick up on it. I told her to honk if she could hear me, but nothing happened. Whatever it was, I quickly accepted that I didn't have it. I continued my meditation, hoping to bring peace to my inner turmoil. I was about to go to war with a woman who wanted me dead, a woman who had powers of which I knew nothing about. A tear stung the corner of my eye as I thought about my son. Nancy coughed, pulling me from my meditation. What do you think? If she'd said something before, I wouldn't have heard it. Think about what? Our odds. A glimpse of fear glimmered in her eyes. If there were any other way, I started. Oh, don't think you're getting out of this thing without me. Even if we couldn't find Felicia, something told me that we'd learn more about whatever it was. I had a feeling that if we could connect with the right people, we might learn something we didn't already know. Something helpful. I cleared my throat. After this, I'm going to need a stiff drink. Nancy chuckled. You can say that again. One song changed to another. What do you make of Wendy? She chuckled. I've been in this business a long time. If she's lying about her abilities, she's the best damn liar I've ever seen. Other than that, don't let her get too close. That girl is strung out on something. Couldn't say what for sure. Pills, maybe? Would make sense considering her job. It didn't surprise me that Nancy had come to the same conclusion I had. The car came to a stop at the beginning of the reservation. People looked at us with strange curiosity. Nancy got out first and approached a couple of teenagers with long hair and baggy clothes. I got out too, but didn't even approach them before she turned around and headed back. She shook her head. Before I got in, I stole a glance at Wendy, who stared back at us. She didn't look pleased to be there. She, too, shook her head. We rode around for a few minutes before we found others hanging outside. We stopped and tried again, hoping that we could locate Chayton. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, Chayton has passed. The man's face didn't budge, didn't flinch. That's what I figured they'd say, because his face had been online and in the paper. I didn't think they'd give us any real answers. We considered another strategy. If she wasn't masquerading around pretending to be him, she could be anyone. The possibilities were endless. Try asking about the lore, about the creature. See if we can find someone who knows something about that. It might be a better place to start than searching for a dead man. Right after the words fell out of my mouth, I felt a hint of guilt. He was much more than just a dead man, and I didn't mean to say that. We drove around for a while searching the streets. People were working, playing, and living their everyday lives without concern. I didn't want to be the one to warn them that there might be a lunatic running around, but I didn't want to be responsible for their deaths either. I didn't know what we were looking for. There weren't any signs telling us which way to go. I was about to give up when I made eye contact with an old woman sitting on a porch. I got out and approached her. Her graying hair danced in the wind. Wincing against the sun, her eyes were nearly closed. Hello, she said. There was something about her, something I couldn't put my finger on. A part of me thought that we'd met before, but it didn't seem possible. The word familiar danced around inside my head as I approached. Have we met before? I asked. She shook her head. I don't believe so. I started with my name and went into why I'd come to the reservation. Unlike before, I didn't find myself guarded. I told her everything, whether she believed me or not. When I finished, I realized I'd been throwing information at her without any thought of consequence. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to thrust all this information on you. It's just that, lifting her hand, she said, Hush, child. She said so, with a calm, reassuring voice. I understand. If we're going to have this conversation, we should put on some tea. Chapter 26. The interior of her old rickety house smelled of old books and new leather. Nancy and Wendy remained behind. Sit, she said, pointing to an old recliner. I'll make the tea. Before taking my seat, I glanced out the window at Nancy and Wendy, who were still scoping the neighborhood. They'd seen me go inside, and I wasn't too worried. Her voice trailed from the kitchen. Don't worry about your friends. They'll be fine. The one girl's terrified, worried that she's losing her mind. I wondered how she knew that. My grandmother summoned her, the one you're looking for. She called upon her during a time of war. The legend had been true, which meant that my dreams were true as well. They brought forth her spirit and covered her with clay and stone. When she first came about, she wore the same skin as my grandmother because that was the blood used to create her. Her hands shook as she carried the tea tray. I stood to help her, but she ushered for me to sit back down. The blood that had brought her forth, I wondered somehow she'd encountered Beverly's blood, or if she'd only taken her shape. That part confused me. I wondered if her familiarity came from seeing her ancestors in the dream. At first, things were good. She protected the tribe. When needed, she worked as an unbeatable opponent. It was during times of peace that the trouble came. You see, she had an insatiable urge to kill, some would say. I tried thinking if anything of the sort had happened during her time with me, but I couldn't recall any deaths. Apparently she'd been poisoning my wife, but if she'd had an insatiable hunger for murder, why were we all still alive? Something didn't add up. She leaned back in her chair. I know what you're thinking. If she was about to kill you, why didn't she? She'd read my mind. If I had to guess, either she learned to suppress her urges, or she had a release. There may be a series of animal corpses lying around somewhere. She paused, lifted her hands in the air. Missing people? Hard to say. There have been a couple of missing pet posters, but nothing unusual for rural America. She's probably out there doing it now, releasing the tension, killing. That's how we were going to find her. We would find the trail of blood leading back to her. I tried thinking about the news, and if I'd seen anything, but I couldn't remember. Then I knew how I'd known her. While going through Chayton's information, I'd seen pictures of them together. She'd known me at first sight, which I wasn't sure how. How'd you know Chayton? A mournful smile turned up the corner of her mouth. Grandson. I nodded. I'm sorry for your loss. He was a sweet boy who grew into a gentle and kind man. I saw the struggle in her eyes, the longing. They were close, and I knew it. There were so many questions I wanted to ask him. Part of me wanted to ask her everything, to get to know and understand him, but that didn't seem possible. There wasn't enough time. There's not much to tell, she said with a shrug. I'm an old woman now, and I could tell you family tales until the sun comes up, but you have a mission. Please, stop her before it's too late. Chapter 26. Chapter 27. They were both staring at me, expectantly, as I stepped out into the sun. I blocked it with my hand. Our time in the house seemed vacant. It could have been 20 minutes, or it could have been 3 hours. I couldn't tell. She hadn't told me how to identify her, or even how to stop her. Although I had a strong inkling I knew how to stop her. What did she say? Wendy asked, concerned. She told me the whole story about how this being came to life and why they locked it away. She told me everything except how to identify when it's disguised. I considered stepping back inside to ask her, but it didn't seem like it would make any difference. I had a strong feeling she'd find us first. Nancy put her hands on her hips. I don't think we should be out here looking for her. I think we should be setting a trap. She'll find us. I don't know how, but I'm certain of it. The same way that she came back to your house to start the fire. My house. The fire. Both of those things horrified me. I didn't want another fire. I didn't want to use it as bait to lure her. There were too many risks. I'd already nearly lost once. What are you thinking? The ruins. Where it all began. I bet if we go out there, she'll come for us. It felt prophetic to say, as if it were the final battle where we were all meant to take our stand. I pictured the three of us on the chessboard in the final moves, both sides down to our final opponents. She had Beverly locked in place with her queen. I approached her black king from the front, and Nancy and Wendy came around the outskirts, the board's perimeter, to ambush her from the sides. For hopefully one last move. Checkmate. It just makes sense, I said, finalizing my thought. We all got back into our cars. Nancy gripped the wheel. She turned to look at me. Are you sure that's what you want to do? I nodded. Seems like the only thing to do. She agreed, firing up the engine. On the drive toward the ruins, a million thoughts ran through my head. Things I didn't want to think about. Things that haunted me for a long time. I felt immense guilt for bringing her into our home. I shouldn't have done it. I should have told Bev earlier that something was wrong, even though she had an incriminating picture of me. I closed my eyes, trying not to think about the possibility that I might not come back. I want to thank you, Nancy. You don't. I do. Nobody in their right mind would go through all of this. A lot of people would have jumped ship by now, or at least asked for a raise. This made her chuckle. I should have thought of that. I, too, laughed. A somber moment came between us. It was never about the money, and you know it. It's always been about the adventure, and about looking out for the people around me. She sighed. I don't have a family of my own. I tried to cut in, but she stopped me. I don't know how much gas I have left in the tank. I almost looked at the gauge when I realized she wasn't talking about the car. I'm not as young as I used to be, and I don't know how much longer I can go on being a PI. She raised her hand, waving me off. It's fine. I've had a great career, done a million things. My body just can't do it much longer. I can't run half as fast or half as far as I could when I was younger. I nodded. I'd known her for a long time, and she'd been one of the best, even past her prime. I'd always use her instead of the younger investigators. I've been thinking about it a lot. This is my last case. Once we're done, I'll retire. Part of me didn't want to admit it. I wanted to think that she'd carry on doing what she'd always done, but I had to respect her wishes. Don't tell me you're moving into a retirement village. No, I think I'd rather move into a hospice. This also made me chuckle. No home for the nearly dead? A sour look crossed her face. Oh, God, no. Chapter 28. The woods surrounding the ruin looked deserted. My pulse slammed in my temple, reminding me of everything I had at stake. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't think around corners. It felt like I was living in survival mode. I tried to think back to my younger years, again to the game of chess. It always seemed like that game was relevant, even when I didn't want it to be. Nancy stepped out first. She looked back at me before taking a deep breath. Neither of us wanted to go back. She pulled the gun out of her waistband and checked the chamber. She nodded at me. Behind us, Wendy's car came to a stop. I wanted to tell her to turn back, to head home. Still, I didn't want her hands dirty because of my mess. She stepped out of the car and looked around. A suspicious look clung to her face. That woman, the one you were talking to, she spoke to me, just like Beverly did, except louder, clearer. What did she say? Felicia stalked your wife, watched her for days, cut her finger about 3 days before she came to your house. She'd been putting up newspaper clippings about the nanny job. She struck herself with a pin on a poster board. I nodded. Some of the clues were starting to make sense. That's not all. She also told me there was only one way to stop her. Fire. My fantasy of locking her back in the cave wouldn't work. She'd fight to the death to avoid going in there. Even if we succeeded, it would only be someone else's problem later. Nancy spoke up. Here's what we could do. We could set up a pyre, hidden in the woods. Unless she comes directly through that patch, she may not even know it's there. Unless, of course, she can read our thoughts. She looked at Wendy. Wendy shrugged. I don't know. As we had this discussion, it reminded me of how unprepared we were. The thought shook me to my core. If only we had more time. If only we had better weapons. I don't think we can put this off any longer. If we were to go home now, she might come for all of us. I think it must end here. My main concern was that she'd go after Beverly in the hospital, or even the baby at my in-laws. Wendy asked, how do we know that she'll come? Well, ever since this thing began, Felicia, or this monster, has been one step ahead. If she doesn't already know we're here, she will. I don't know how she knew everything she did. Part of it was because she stole my phone. She had an eye on all my communications. That's how she knew about Chayton. I've got an idea, Nancy said. I have a pair of binoculars in my car. We could post in the trees, or maybe on top of those rocks over there. She pointed just above the cave. We could keep an eye out for her. Use our cell phones to keep in communication. The other two of us can go into the woods and set up. This reminded me of Mark's plan all those years ago when we tried getting the soccer ball back from the Wilburns. Mark gave us all walkie-talkies, telling Brad and Tyler to be lookouts for Jack Wilburn, while Mark and I broke into his house, calling us all dumbasses. If it wasn't horrible timing, I would have smiled at the thought. I was curious how they were doing. You wouldn't happen to have a second gun, would you? Wendy asked. Nancy shook her head. Wendy, you'll be the one on the rocks. Remember, lay low. Nancy began to walk toward her car to retrieve the binoculars. Nancy and I will go into the woods. Wendy nodded. Watching her disappear into the woods made me uneasy. I didn't like her being out there alone and wished I'd gone with her. Part of me expected to hear her scream. It didn't take long before she returned through the woodline carrying a case. Nancy handed off the binoculars, and we walked down the edge of the woods. I couldn't help looking over my shoulder to see if Felicia was out there, watching. Although I couldn't directly feel her eyes on me, I couldn't help thinking that she still might be a few steps ahead. Looking over my shoulder, I asked, "What do we do if she is disguised as someone else? According to the lore, she could take shape of anything." It worried me because she might be able to sneak up on us. Nancy replied, we put a bullet in its fucking skull. We both knew a bullet wouldn't stop her, but it might slow her down long enough to get through with the other plan. I liked her optimism, solving problems like a gunslinger. After walking for a few minutes, we found a small clearing in the woods. That wasn't obvious from the cave. This is the spot. Together we began gathering sticks, branches, flammable things. Memories of the odd jobs I'd done when I was younger came back to me. I'd done a lot of landscaping with my uncle to keep money in my pocket. It took us nearly an hour to get something that would work. It didn't look anything like a pyre, or even like a stake at which we could burn a witch. It looked more like a bonfire that a few townies would drink beer around. It wasn't pretty, but it would work. Hopefully. Just as we were coming to the end of it, my phone rang. Wendy's name came across the screen and my stomach became a pit. I picked it up. She whispered into the phone, "She's here." Chapter 29. We couldn't leave the woods where we'd just come from. That would be too obvious. We walked a little before exiting the trees. She still looked like Beverly, absent with the red hair, which broke my heart. As I walked toward her, I wondered if she'd spotted Wendy. Nancy asked, "Should I blast her from here?" I shook my head. The thought sounded great to me, but there were too many questions I wanted answered. "Give her a chance to explain herself," I mumbled. "If she makes any quick moves, blow her head off," I said. A cool breeze blew across my face. I thought it was much too nice a night to commit such a horrible crime. From the corner of my eye, I saw Nancy walking beside me. There wasn't anyone in the world whom I wanted to be in that position more than her. I knew she wouldn't let me down. Felicia said with a laugh, "Well, isn't this a sight for sore eyes? Robert, Robert, Robert. I never would have imagined that you'd make it this far." A breeze rustled my hair. What did you do to Beverly?" Her mouth creased. Right to the point. Not even a bit of foreplay. Part of me wanted to tell Nancy to blow her head off anyway. "What did you do to her?" My voice trembled. She rolled her eyes. "Poisoned her, of course." I shouted, "Will she live?" She shrugged. "Why me?" This made her chuckle. "Relax, you're not that special. It could have been anyone, really." She took a couple of steps closer. I expected Nancy to put her hand on her gun, but she didn't. "If you really wanted to know the whole plan before I kill you, I guess I could explain. Originally, I planned on replacing her. That's why I took her form. While lying around on a box dressed like a vagrant, I saw her walk by. If her In her hand, she held a flyer. After she left, I approached the board and saw that she'd been looking for a nanny. I thought I could take it if I looked familiar to you. I thought I might be able to replace her. That was the plan. It wasn't until I realized that she hadn't gone to work, but had stayed home on the day of the interview, that I had to make changes to that plan. She'd been stalking us right from the beginning, watching, waiting for an opportunity to get into our lives. I hated her for it. I wanted to kill her, take Nancy's gun, and blow a hole in her skull. She waved her hand in the air, excusing her behavior. If not for her getting in the way, things should have gone, or would have gone, differently. I could have taken her place, slid into your life. You would have never known. She paused, except for her hair. Blonde, brown, black, no problem. But that red hair isn't easy to hold for more than a few minutes at a time. But you didn't seem to mind the difference. She looked directly into my eyes. Did you, Robert? When you made passionate love to me? You're sick, I shouted. You drugged me. She chuckled. Your wife is sick because of some death cap mushrooms. Easy to acquire if you know where to look. The test results were easy to manipulate, too. My temper raged. I jerked, ready to hit her. Nancy stopped me. I couldn't attack her yet. There were still too many unanswered questions. More than anything, I wanted to see her change. I wanted to see her change. And to know we weren't killing a human. I couldn't live with myself if I killed a person. However, I could live with myself if I killed a skinwalker or a mimic. A half smile crept across her face. She jumped at my advance, which gave me hope that she might be more vulnerable than I thought. I was on to you right from the start, I said. I knew you were up to no good. The smile faded. She chortled and then pushed me. Unexpecting. I hadn't braced myself for the attack. I fell on my back and a gust of wind shot out of my lungs. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds and everything hurt. It reminded me that I wasn't 20 anymore. Nancy kicked her in the chest, pushing her back a few feet. By some miracle, she didn't fall. Before I gathered my bearings, Nancy grabbed me by the arm and jerked me to my feet. Go, 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 she shouted, pushing me ahead. I ran. Adrenaline took over, numbing the pain. I looked over my shoulder just in time to see the bullet hit Felicia. The bang made my ears ring. Chapter 30. The bullet didn't stop her. At first she ran behind us on foot, in her human persona. She still looked like my wife, with a bullet in her shoulder. It wasn't until we were halfway to the woods that she realized she couldn't catch us on foot. First hair sprouted from all over her body, silvery and flowing in the breeze. Her face became thinner, and her nose elongated. Long triangular ears pierced through the fur. Her limbs, which had once been pale and flesh, shriveled into paws. She fell onto 4 feet, a wolf, with icy blue eyes that seemed to glow in the night's darkness. I didn't like our odds. On foot, we'd gained a significant lead. When she turned into the dog, she gained on us quickly. I wondered if we were going to make it to the woods at all. My heart hammered in my chest, and I remembered being younger and in better shape. To my right, Nancy lost ground. She was significantly older than me, but undoubtedly in better shape. When she saw me looking back, she told me to keep going. Go, Robert, she called. You know what to do. My jaw fell open as I watched Nancy fall and roll over onto her back. The wolf pounced on her, gnashing its teeth. I couldn't stand watching it. Couldn't bring myself to look back again. That's when I heard numerous shots. Howls of pain echoed through the air, followed by screams. I tried not to imagine the wolf tearing her limb from limb. I couldn't push the thought out of my head. The only thing that kept me sane was the rhythmic pumping of my heart and the heavy breathing of my lungs. With every step, my legs burned. By sacrificing herself, Nancy had given me enough lead to run into the woods. I knew then I'd have to make my stand. I shuffled through my pocket in search of a lighter. My feet slid in the dirt as I came to a stop. She slowed down behind me, knowing she could catch me with a pounce if she chose to. I let her believe she had me pinned. While approaching, I noticed she kept weight off one of her legs. A trail of blood followed. "You've got me," I said. "Now what are you going to do? Kill me?" "Was that your plan all along?" I scoffed. With every word, I stepped closer to the pile of sticks. "You've got me right where you want me." I didn't think she could speak in her current form and didn't expect her to. I spun around to keep an eye on her until branches scratched my back. A twig snapped below my sneaker. I could have sworn I'd seen a smile cross her face, or a smirk. A low, guttural sound came from her throat. She lowered her body into a mousing position, prepared to pounce. Just before she did, I managed to grab a stick from the pile and swing. Although it broke in a quick snap, she jerked backward, wounded. She took a couple of steps back to assess the damage. I knew I didn't have much time. The gallop in my chest had subsided somewhat, and I managed to catch my breath. Dry leaves crackled underfoot. I reached down and grabbed a handful of them. Before I could even flick the lighter, she pounced again, knocking me to the ground. There she stood over me, drool dripping down onto my face. Scrounging for leverage, I tried keeping distance between her teeth and my throat. She growled, adjusted, and snapped. With one arm across her neck, I managed to keep her at bay. She was too busy trying to bite me to hear the scratching flint. The hair on her belly ignited. She shrieked and jumped off me. The smell of burning hair filled the air. While she licked her wound, I lit the first few leaves. One stick caught fire rather quickly. She looked up just in time to see me swipe. The branch connected with her head, knocking her onto her side with a loud thump. With the blunt end of the stick, I slammed it down against her head. At first I tried breaking it through her skull. When I realized that wouldn't work, I jammed it into her eyeball. It sank through the socket with a pop and a squish. The fire grew behind me, the heat licking my back. She cried in pain and terror as the stick broke off. A jagged piece of wood protruded from her face. She regained her footing, howling and barking in agony. It didn't stop me. It didn't stop her from inching closer. "You made a fatal mistake, Felicia," I said, backing closer to the fire. "You didn't kill her." She whipped her head around. As she did, Nancy plugged her right between the eyes. Chapter 31. She lay still on the ground. Her body began transforming back to its human form. I watched in awe as it happened. I'd never seen anything like it before. I looked over at Nancy, who looked like she'd aged a lot in the past hour. There were cuts and bruises, tears in her flesh that would need stitches. Smoke rolled into the sky as the pyre ignited. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded. Blood trickled from the gash in her arm, squeezed between her fingers and dripping onto the bed of dried leaves below. "It's just a flesh wound," she joked. She pointed to Felicia's human form, lying in the dirt. "Should we leave her?" I shook my head. "Can't take that chance." 2 steps took me to her side. Smoke and heat pressed against my face. I reached down to lift her body. Before I touched her, she jumped. It startled me, knocking me to the ground. Nancy fired another round. It cracked like thunder. She fell with a thud. Her body shook and trembled. I watched as it transformed repeatedly, taking the shape of various people and animals, each in a flash. She continued to seize for a while until coming to a stop. What remained didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. Its body was much taller than I expected. Thinner, too. Its skin looked unrealistically pale, like it belonged on a different planet. The very sight of it unsettled me to the core. I knew if I'd seen it, I'd see it again in my nightmares. Rather than trying to lift this massive creature into the fire, I grabbed a few of the already burning branches and covered its body. The horrible smell of burning flesh filled the air, but we couldn't bring ourselves to walk away because we both believed that it had one last jump left. It didn't. The body scorched and blackened. The fire consumed it. "It's over," she said, patting me on the back. "It's finally over." The stick crunched behind us. Nancy whipped around with her firearm drawn. "Jesus!" Wendy cried. She lowered her gun. "Sorry, just a bit on edge." Wendy stepped closer. "I came down as quick as I could, hoping I'd be able to help. Looks like you guys beat me to it." She observed the raging fire. She noticed the state of Nancy's arm and tried to help. But without supplies, there wasn't much she could do, more than tightening clothes around it to slow the bleeding. We all climbed back into the car and took off to the hospital. The exhaustion clung to us as we rode down the highway. Nancy wouldn't let either of us take the wheel, which pissed me off at first. She wasn't in any condition to drive, but it didn't stop her. Nothing did. For the most part, the car ride was quiet. We didn't listen to the radio, didn't cry or scream. We didn't even recount what we'd been through. None of us had the energy for it. We all just sat in quiet reflection as trees passed. When we approached the hospital, I couldn't believe we'd gone full circle. We were right back where we'd begun. Nancy parked her car and stepped out. She looked at me, looked at Wendy, and began walking toward the doors. The electric doors slid open. Nancy approached the reception desk. I put my hand on her shoulder. "If you're all right from here, I think I'll visit Beverly." She nodded. "I'll be back to check on you soon, when they get you into a room." Wendy and I walked down the hallway. Although I wasn't sure why she'd stuck with me, I liked the company. She could have set off on her own at any time. We got off the elevator and headed for the room. There were people standing in the hall outside her door looking in. I found it rather concerning, and even picked up my pace. Before I could say anything, someone told me that she'd woken up. I pushed my way inside. Surrounded by people, I could hardly see Beverly. When I got closer, she turned her head to look at me. There she was, just as beautiful as the day I'd met her. I wrapped her up in my arms. Numerous kisses came and went. People around us cheered before filing out of the room to give us our privacy. "Thank God," I said. "It's good to see you again," she said, smiling at me. "How are you? Where's our baby?" "Relax. Bobby is with her parents. He's safe." She turned to look at Wendy. A smile crossed her face. "You must be the nurse," she said. "It's nice to meet you in person." Wendy nodded. "Likewise." "Sorry about getting inside your head," she said, pushing herself up further on the bed. I grabbed a cup of water on the nearby table and slid the straw into her mouth. She licked cracked lips. "Thought I was going crazy for a little while," Wendy said. She circled her head with a finger. When she finished the water, I placed the cup back on the table and held her hand. "How did everything turn out?" she asked. There were a lot of things I wanted to tell her, but I didn't think it was the time or the place. "Everything is safe again." She opened her mouth to ask more questions, but stopped when she looked at the door. There in the doorway were her parents holding our baby. Dev nearly jumped out of the hospital bed in excitement. Her father smiled. "Wow, isn't that a surprise?" he said, holding back tears. "We were just coming for a visit, and here you are. You're awake." He closed the distance on the bed and held the baby out for her. He helped place him in her arms. Beverly whispered, "We made it." I felt my pocket vibrate. I reached in and saw the screen. Incoming call. Rhea. Answer or deny. I stepped out of the room to let Beverly's parents speak with her, and so I could hear, as everyone was excited and speaking loudly in the hall. I slid the green circle to the word answer. I put the phone to my ear and covered my other ear to block out some of the background noise. "Ray!" "Bobby." I could hear the panic in her voice. "I know you have a lot going on with Beverly, but she's awake. I think she'll be all right. What is it?" "Oh, good," she replied, before taking in a deep, audible breath. "This is hard to tell you. I know you're not going to believe me because it sounds crazy. I promise I'm not crazy. I'm not lying, but I think